Chapter 328. Wei Zhouduan was surprised by forefather Wei's sudden visit. He naturally knew the Wei clan's ancestor and had many dealings with him when they were young. Of course, with their personalities and standpoints, these so-called dealings were naturally more confrontational and conflicting. But as forefather Wei went into seclusion, the two did not have much interaction. Wei Zhouduan knew that forefather Wei was famed for his fear of death. When his vitality started to decline, this old man did not dare to stay in the Jianghu. He hid in the back residence of the Wei family to recuperate and wanted to extend his lifespan. When forefather Wei saw Wei Zhouduan, he smiled and cupped his hands. "We have not seen each other for many years. Official Wei is still as elegant as ever." Wei Zhouduan put on a fake smile and said, "The two of us can be considered old acquaintances, so don't talk so much nonsense. All these years, you haven't taken a single step out of the Wei clan. Why have you suddenly come to find me?" Seeing Wei Zhouduan so direct, forefather Wei did not keep him in suspense. He said gravely, "Chu Xiu. The Wei family has come for Chu Xiu." Wei Zhouduan frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Forefather Wei said gravely, "Official Wei, you should know what I mean. Chu Xiu has wild ambitions. As long as he exists, Guanxi will not have a day of peace." This time, Chu Xiu was so arrogant that he went to other prefectures to capture people. I sent Wei Chongling to demand an explanation, but he was wounded by Chu Xiu's subordinates. Lord Wei, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but Chu Xiu's influence in the Guanxi region is stronger than yours. After a period of time, I'm afraid that the entire Guanxi region will only know of Chu Xiu and not you, Lord Wei. Wei Zhouduan's expression changed, but he still snorted. So what? This old man is about to retire. Do I still care about these things like fame and fortune? The Wei clan ancestor revealed a faint smile. "Master Wei, you and I have known each other for several decades. Do you think I don't know what kind of person you are? Can you just swallow your anger? Just now, you told me not to keep you in suspense. Now, let's be frank. Chu Xiu capturing someone from my Wei family is a small matter, but my Wei family losing face is a big matter. So, my Wei family must get this person back, and Chu Xiu must give in. As for you, Lord Wei, I'm sure you also want to suppress Chu Xiu. This time, you and I can join forces and completely suppress Chu Xiu's arrogance. This time, Chu Xiu is in the wrong. Don't tell me that Lord Wei doesn't even have the courage to touch Chu Xiu." Hearing this, Wei Zhouduan's face immediately revealed a hint of anger. However, before Wei Zhouduan could react, the Wei clan's patriarch handed him a card. Wei Zhouduan opened it and saw a large number of precious spirit medicines and cultivation resources. The Wei clan's patriarch said indifferently, "I knew that Lord Wei was preparing to retire, so I prepared these gifts for you in advance." Wei Zhouduan closed the card and thought for a while before saying, "In 3 days, come to the main hall to collect the person. I will ask Chu Xiu to hand over the person." The Wei clan's patriarch nodded and left. Just as the Wei clan's patriarch had said, Wei Zhouduan had long wanted to suppress Chu Xiu. Now that he had this opportunity, it was just right. Especially since the benefits that the Wei clan's patriarch had given him were something that Wei Zhouduan could not refuse. Wei Zhouduan ordered someone to call Yang Ling over. After entering, Yang Ling immediately bowed and said, "Foster father, why are you looking for me?" Seeing Yang Ling, Wei Zhouduan's expression became a little better. The Guanxi patrol envoys were either disloyal like Chu Xiu, or like Jiang Taoran and the others, each with their own schemes and eagerly waiting for him to leave. The one who was truly on his side and reliable was his foster son, Yang Ling, whom he had been nurturing and taking care of all this time. Thinking of this, Wei Zhouduan really felt that he had treated Yang Ling unfairly all these years. Looking at Yang Ling, Wei Zhouduan's expression softened a little. He said, "You should have heard about what Chu Xiu has done during this period of time. Now that the Wei clan has come knocking, I is also prepared to suppress this Chu Xiu. Go and tell Chu Xiu that in 3 days, bring the person to the branch and hand the person over to the Wei clan. Yang Ling said hesitantly, but foster father, with Chu Xiu's personality, will he hand the person over so easily? Wei Jiuduan said indifferently, not handing the person over is disobeying orders. Don't forget, I am still the disciplinary officer. It is a big taboo to go against one's superiors in the Guanzhong torture room. If Chu Xiu dares to disobey orders, although I won't go too far, it won't be a problem for me to take away one of his prefectures. Even Hall Leader Guan won't be able to say anything. Hall Leader Guan is impartial and impartial. Even if he is biased towards Chu Xiu, he will still have to consider the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, right? Yang Ling's heart trembled. According to what Wei Jiuduan said, regardless of whether Chu Xiu handed the person over or not, he would actually be at a disadvantage. If he handed the person over, he would definitely lose his reputation. As long as he handed the person over, the people of Guanxi would definitely think, so what if you, Chu Xiu, are arrogant? In the end, you still have to compromise. If he didn't hand the person over, Wei Jiuduan would use the crime of disobeying orders to take away one of the prefectures under Chu Xiu. This was even more unsolvable. A higher official could crush a person to death. Unless Guan Xiu could step forward to stop it, could Chu Xiu kill Wei Jiuduan? However, according to Yang Ling's understanding of Guan Xiu's personality, it seemed like she wouldn't intervene in such matters. After thinking for a moment, Yang Ling respectfully cupped his hands at Wei Jiuduan and said, "Yes, I will do it now." After exiting the main door, Yang Ling immediately headed to the Jianghu prefecture. At that moment, he was already completely tied up in Chu Xiu's carriage. It was too late to leave now. Once he entered the hall, Yang Ling said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Official Chu, something bad has happened. Wei Jiuduan has joined forces with the 9 Plains Wei family to deal with you." With that, Yang Ling directly told him about the conspiracy and plans of Wei Jiuduan and the Wei family. Wei Jiuduan thought that he only had one loyal godson, Yang Ling, under him. If he knew that Yang Ling had sold him out in such a short time, Wei Jiuduan would probably go berserk from anger before Chu Xiu could do anything. After hearing this, Chu Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a hint of coldness. To be honest, Chu Xiu actually didn't want to deal with Wei Jiuduan so soon. Previously, Chu Xiu's plan was to make Wei Jiuduan a mere figurehead step by step. With Wei Jiuduan as the disciplinary officer above him, Chu Xiu's authority would be completely above Wei Jiuduan's. This way, once he reached the unity of heaven and man realm, he would naturally become the disciplinary officer. The rules of the Guanzhong torture room had always been like this. The torture officers were all promoted from their respective territories. This way, they would have a certain foundation and would be easier to manage. With Chu Xiu's current power in Guanxi, as long as he reached the unity of heaven and man realm step by step, the position of Guanxi torture officer would definitely belong to him. But now that Wei Jiuduan insisted on finding trouble with him, Chu Xiu couldn't care so much. Regardless of whether it was the first or the second of Wei Jiuduan's conditions, Chu Xiu wouldn't agree to them. Since that was the case, Chu Xiu wouldn't choose either and would choose to completely fall out with them. After calling the Ghost Hand King and the others over, Chu Xiu explained his plan to them. The Ghost Hand King and the others could accept it, but Yang Ling's eyes widened in shock. He hesitated and said, "Official Chu, is this really feasible?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Nothing in this world is 100% feasible. I can only reduce the variables to the minimum. Yang Ling, you are the most crucial part of this. If you don't participate, I won't force you. If you stand on my side, there will definitely be a place for you in the Guanxi area in the future. You know my personality. I'm not Wei Jiuduan, and I don't like to paint pavilions in the sky for others." Yang Ling smiled bitterly and said, "Whatever Lord says, this subordinate will do." Chu Xiu gave him 2 choices, but he didn't dare to choose the former. He had heard everything, and Chu Xiu had something on him. If he didn't want to follow Chu Xiu, then there was only one path: death. Chu Xiu didn't force him, because there was no need to force him to choose death. 3 days later, Chu Xiu brought the Ghost Hand King and the others to the Guanxi branch. Actually, ever since Chu Xiu came to the Guanxi branch, he rarely came to the branch. Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to deal with Wei Jiuduan, and he didn't want to deal with Wei Jiuduan either. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. Perhaps from today onwards, this place would be under his control. Of course, it depended on whether things went smoothly. After the surrounding warriors of the Guanxi branch saw Chu Xiu, they all greeted Chu Xiu. Their attitudes were not bad. In fact, Chu Xiu's reputation in the entire Guanzhong torture room was still very good. Although he was mostly cursed in the outside world, he was, after all, a member of the Guanzhong torture room. For so many years, the Guanzhong torture room had always been unknown. It wasn't easy for a person like Chu Xiu to become famous outside. Regardless of whether his reputation was good or bad, it was enough for the Guanzhong torture room to gain face. Even if they were all Wei Jiuduan's men, this didn't prevent them from having a good impression of Chu Xiu. From this, it could be seen how bad Wei Jiuduan's methods were. In the entire Guanxi branch, there was almost no one who truly stood on Wei Jiuduan's side. Even his adopted son, Yang Ling, had some complaints about him. Since ancient times, the way to control subordinates relied on nothing more than 2 things. One was a strong personal charisma, just like the previous hall master Chu Kuanga, who was respected by all the warriors in the pugilistic world. The other was benefits. If you brought benefits to your subordinates, they would risk their lives for you. The more benefits you could give to your subordinates, the more they would risk their lives for you. This was because they were afraid that one day, someone who could risk his life even more than them would come and replace their position. This was what Chu Xiu was currently using. He firmly believed that a relationship maintained by benefits was more reliable than the so-called familial and brotherly love. Just like now, Chu Xiu's subordinates, Du Guangzhong, and the group from the Blue Dragon Society. Both sides were competing with each other, afraid that they would be pulled apart by the other and then abandoned by Chu Xiu. Chapter 329. In the main hall of the Guanxi branch, Chu Xiu entered with his men. Aside from Wei Jiuduan sitting in the middle with Yang Ling standing behind him, there was also the Wei family's ancestor and a few Wei family disciples. The Wei family's head, Wei Mok, wasn't here. The Wei family was such a large family, so there had to be someone guarding it. When he saw Chu Xiu walk in with his men, the Wei family's ancestor subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu. He was very curious about Chu Xiu. For an old man like the Wei family's ancestor who had lived for more than 100 years, he had seen many young talents, but there weren't many who could do what Chu Xiu did. Being born in a sect and being born in the wilderness were 2 completely different types of treatment. The former was easy, but the latter was difficult. It was extremely difficult for Chu Xiu to reach his current position by relying on his humble background. However, the Wei family's ancestor already knew what kind of person Chu Xiu was just by looking at his face. This person's eyes were sinister, but he could still look straight at his superior, Wei Jiuduan. It could be imagined that Chu Xiu didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Wei Jiuduan. He was a person with wild ambitions. However, the Wei family's ancestor didn't mind. Rules were rules. As long as Chu Xiu wanted to stay in the Guanzhong torture room, he had to abide by these rules. How could he, Chu Xiu, dare to kill Wei Jiuduan? In the main hall, when Wei Jiuduan saw Chu Xiu arrive, he said indifferently, "You're here? Have a seat." Chu Xiu cupped his hands perfunctorily and sat down with his men. His attitude immediately made Wei Jiuduan even angrier. With a cold snort, Wei Jiuduan said, "Chu Xiu, you should know why I called you here today. I have so many inspectors under me, but you're the most courageous one. You're the Jian province's inspector. Who gave you the authority to arrest people in the Chen province? Who? Wei Jiuduan slammed the table and shouted angrily. His aggressive manner made it seem like he wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Is Sir Wei very angry? I arrested people from the Jiuyuan Wei family, not your people. Are you prepared to fall out with me for an outsider?" Before Wei Jiuduan could speak, the Wei family stood up and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, the Wei family didn't plan to be your enemy. The Guanzhong torture room and the local powers of the Guanzhong have never been opposing each other. The Guanzhong torture hall is the fish, and the Wulin factions of Guanzhong are the water. Neither side can do without the other, but you insist on taking things to the extreme, forcing the Wei family to act. The Wei family has been around for 1,000 years. Before the Guanzhong torture room was built, the Wei family was already in the Guanzhong area. You, an inspector, want to control the Wei family? You're delusional. You've crossed borders and captured a disciple of the Wei family. That's against the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Hand over the person, and we'll forget about this for now. Otherwise, Sir Wei will get justice for the Wei family." Wei Jiuduan also said coldly, "Chu Xiu, I told you to hand over the person. Did you bring him? Do you know the consequences of disobeying orders? Don't think that you can ignore the higher-ups just because you've made some contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. If I take down one of your provinces, even Hallmaster Guan won't be able to say anything if he finds out." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Since Sir Wei has spoken, I'll give you face. I've already brought the person." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Wei Jiuduan and the Wei family's ancestor looked at each other, their eyes revealing a trace of smugness. Their guess was right. Compared to disobeying orders, this Chu Xiu could be considered to be sensible. Handing over the person and taking a step back would at least protect the province under his control. This way, it would be more practical. After a while, Fire Slave carried a person into the hall and closed the door at the same time. However, neither Wei Jiuduan nor the Wei family's ancestor noticed the Fire Slave's action of closing the door. Their gazes were all focused on Wei Chen. The current Wei Chen was simply miserable to the extreme. His cultivation had already been crippled, his dantian destroyed, and the tendons in his hands and feet had all been completely crushed. He hadn't used a sword to cut them, but had forcibly crushed them with his bare hands. Such a ruthless method had completely crippled Wei Chen. Moreover, it wasn't just his martial arts that were crippled, but his entire person. He would probably be bedridden for the rest of his life. Seeing Wei Chen's appearance, the Wei family's ancestor's expression was already extremely gloomy. What was the use of bringing such a cripple back to the Wei family? Would he be ridiculed by others? How was Chu Xiu making a concession? This was clearly a provocation. Wei Jiuduan was currently in a violent rage. He had asked Chu Xiu to bring Wei Chen over, but in the end, Chu Xiu had brought a cripple over. This was clearly a deliberate provocation of his dignity. Wei Jiuduan had just stood up and was about to scold Chu Xiu when Chu Xiu stood up first and said coldly, "Lord Wei, have you slammed the table enough? Slamming the table doesn't mean that the person's words are effective. You are someone who is about to retire, so why do you still want to meddle in these matters? Wouldn't it be better to obediently endure until you retire, then find a place to withdraw from the pugilistic world and retire? The Wei family has given you a lot of elixirs and pills, as expected of the Guanxi great family with 1,000 years of history. But Lord Wei, although some things are never too much, you should be prepared to spend them even if you have the life to earn them." Hearing this, the words that Wei Jiuduan had wanted to say were immediately swallowed back down. A wave of cold air instantly rushed to his head. How did Chu Xiu know that the Wei family had given him things? By guessing? But even if it was a guess, how did Chu Xiu know that the Wei family had given him elixirs and pills? Someone had leaked the secret. Only a few of Wei Jiuduan's confidants knew about this. Who was it that had informed Chu Xiu beforehand? Thinking of this, Wei Jiuduan felt that something was wrong. If someone had really leaked the secret to Chu Xiu, why would Chu Xiu still appear here? Purposely walking into a trap? But without waiting for Wei Jiuduan to think further, behind him, On Ling, who had always been very low-key, suddenly had an ominous glint in his eyes. All the vital energy in his body had been poured into a 9-inch long steel needle, which he stabbed towards Wei Jiuduan's back. The steel needle in Yang Ling's hand was Tang Ye's hidden weapon, the life-seizing bone needle. But originally, there was no poison on it, but Chu Xiu was afraid that it was not safe, so he had Ghost Hand King mix some highly toxic substances and smear it on the steel needle. A small steel needle could not take Wei Jiuduan's life, but Chu Xiu could. Wei Jiuduan had never thought that Yang Ling, who he had thought was the most loyal to him, would actually secretly attack him from behind. Moreover, it was a fatal attack. It was unknown what the steel needle was made of, but it was incomparably strong. It directly tore apart Wei Jiuduan's protective vital energy, and stabbed towards his back. Only at this time did Wei Jiuduan really react. Under the stimulation of killing intent, his whole body exploded with a strong gang qi. With a loud bang, Yang Ling was directly hit by the gang qi and flew out while vomiting blood. And the steel needle had just barely left a bloody mark on Wei Jiuduan's arm. Although Yang Ling vomited blood because of this move, the corner of his mouth bloomed with a trace of a smile, because his mission had been completed at this time. The poison on the steel needle was not considered strong. After all, Ghost Hand King was not a poison expert like the 5 Poison sect, but this poison still had some effect on Wei Jiuduan. But at this time, Chu Xiu had already made his move. At the moment when Yang Ling made his move, Chu Xiu gathered his essence, qi, and spirit. His mental energy revolved to the extreme, and the heaven sun gazing at air technique was displayed. At this time, Chu Xiu's eyes were even slightly white, and there was not a trace of black in his eyes. He was like a ghost god, and looked extremely terrifying. Chu Xiu had been in seclusion for so many days. Although he was not able to advance the heaven sun gazing at air technique to another realm, he had comprehended some of the uses of the heaven sun gazing at air technique. For example, at this time, he used all his mental energy on the heaven sun gazing at air technique. At this time, the line that represented Wei Jiuduan's power was constantly dancing, but it was extremely slow, as if it was in slow motion. This was not because Wei Jiuduan's speed was slow, but because Chu Xiu's eyes were too fast. By using all his mental energy on the heaven sun gazing at air technique, Chu Xiu even entered a subtle realm when he saw the opponent's loophole. Although he still could not predict the real change of the 3, or calculate the cause and effect of heaven's secrets, it allowed Chu Xiu to have a deeper understanding of the loophole. There was only one chance. From Yang Ling's move to Chu Xiu's move, both sides seemed to have practiced it countless times. It was simply seamless, and the timing was not different for a moment. The heaven's demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand had already been unsheathed. At this time, all the spiritual energy in his body condensed on the blade, causing the originally black blade to become dark red, as if it was cast with blood. At the same time, the power of qi and blood flowed into the heaven's demon dance, and the devil weapon, the heaven's demon dance, seemed to feel Chu Xiu's mood. After absorbing Chu Xiu's power of qi and blood, its aura had become extremely fierce and evil. It was definitely a devil weapon among devil weapons. Staring closely at the lines that represented Wei Jiuduan, he found the weakest one. When Chu Xiu's blade fell, it was strangely silent. A bloody light flashed, and the surging devil qi had just erupted. Wei Jiuduan's face still had the disbelief of being sneak attacked by his adopted son. On the other side, the Wei family's ancestor seemed to have just reacted, and his hand had just grasped the hilt of his sword. In such a short moment, Chu Xiu's ultimate blade easily tore apart Wei Jiuduan's protective aura, and it fell from an unimaginable angle. Blood splattered, and Wei Jiuduan's head directly flew into the sky, and blood splattered on the ground. Chu Xiu's eyes returned to normal, and the hand that was holding the heaven's demon dance trembled slightly. This blade not only consumed Chu Xiu's spiritual energy and power of qi and blood, but most importantly, it almost drained his spiritual energy. From the moment Yang Ling made his move, Chu Xiu used the heaven's sun gazing at air to the extreme. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to cooperate with Yang Ling so tacitly. This kind of thing could not be practiced in advance. Fortunately, Yang Ling's attack was decisive, and Chu Xiu also seized this opportunity. The two of them cooperated and actually beheaded Wei Jiuduan with one blade. Although Wei Jiuduan was only an old man at the unity of heaven and man realm, no matter how old he was still at the unity of heaven and man realm. If Chu Xiu's matter was placed in the pugilistic world, it could almost be called a miracle. Chapter 330. As Wei Jiuduan's head fell to the ground, the people present were still unable to react. Before the Wei family's great ancestor could even draw his sword, Wei Jiuduan was already dead in front of him. This made him immediately widen his eyes, his face full of disbelief. It was true that Chu Xiu was strong, and it was also true that he also had a record of killing people in the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, Chu Xiu was in the three-flower realm before, but now Chu Xiu had already stepped into the five qis collecting in mind realm. However, what was the situation when Chu Xiu killed Feng Wulong last time? It was a fight to the death with almost all his strength, but now Chu Xiu only used a knife to cut off Wei Jiuduan's head. Was Chu Xiu too strong, or was Wei Jiuduan, a great expert in the unity of heaven and man realm, so old that he could no longer fight? They could not see exactly what kind of power and price Chu Xiu had paid to kill Wei Jiuduan. Even though it had only been a short instant, the amount of power and energy Chu Xiu had expended was even more than what he had expended in the 15 minutes he had spent fighting with others. Smiling at the Wei family's great ancestor and the others, Chu Xiu shouted, "The people of the Wei family killed Lord Wei Jiuduan and despised the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are punishable by death. None of them can escape." The door was opened, and the people in the Guanxi branch rushed into the lobby when they heard the sound. They were stunned when they saw Wei Jiuduan's body on the ground, not knowing what had happened. At this time, Yang Ling, who had been beaten by Wei Jiuduan to the point of vomiting blood, stood up, pointed at the Wei family's great ancestor and the others, and shouted, "Attack! They killed my adoptive father." Everyone in the Guanxi area knew that Chu Xiu and Wei Jiuduan did not get along, so they did not believe what Chu Xiu said. However, Yang Ling was different. Everyone in Guanxi knew that Yang Ling was Wei Jiuduan's godson and Wei Jiuduan's confidant. The credibility of his words was much higher than that of Chu Xiu. Moreover, now that Wei Jiuduan was dead, they subconsciously chose to listen to Yang Ling and attack the Wei family together. Chu Xiu recovered his Zhen Qi, and the heavenly demon dance brought with it a sinister blood light and devil qi as it slashed towards the Wei family old ancestor. There was a hidden killing intent in the blade momentum. Wei clan's old ancestor's sword descended, and the icy soul-cold light slashed out, blocking Chu Xiu's blade. He roared, "Chu Xiu was the one who killed him. You've all been deceived." Even though the Wei family patriarch was shouting, no one was listening to him. One was an outsider, and the other was a hero of Guanzhong torture room, a person who was the face of Guanzhong torture room. Was there a need to say more about whom they would choose to believe? The most important thing was that Yang Ling was here. Even if they did not believe in Chu Xiu, they had to believe in Yang Ling. This was also why Chu Xiu said that Yang Ling was the most important part of his plan. Stepping into the five qis collecting in the origin realm, Chu Xiu was actually confident that he could kill Wei Jiuduan head-on. Wei Jiuduan's strength was not too strong, and he was now old. According to Chu Xiu's investigation, Wei Jiuduan had almost never really fought in the past few years. His qi and blood were already very serious. If it was not for the fact that there were no suitable candidates in Guanzhong torture room, he was afraid that he would have already retired. Chu Xiu had now stepped into the 5 cheese collecting in the origin realm. If they fought face to face, even if Wei Jiuduan did not have any loopholes, Chu Xiu could still force a loophole out of him. However, how long would it take to kill Wei Jiuduan in a head-on battle? This was something that even Chu Xiu himself could not say for sure. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse. Although Wei Jiuduan was old, no matter how old he was still in the unity of heaven and man realm. God knew what other trump cards he had. When the time came, the whole city would know about it. Even if Chu Xiu had done so many meritorious deeds for Guanzhong torture room, and even if he had a great reputation, he would not be able to get away with it. Therefore, Chu Xiu chose to let Yang Ling launch a sneak attack while he cooperated with Yang Ling. With the power of the heaven sun gazing at air technique, he seized the opportunity that Yang Ling had created for him and finally killed Wei Jiuduan with one slash. Just like what Yang Ling had said, this time, Chu Xiu was not 100% confident. If Yang Ling's strength was not enough and he did not injure Wei Jiuduan, if Wei Jiuduan's strength was beyond his imagination, and he did not reveal any loopholes after being sneak attacked by his own people, then Chu Xiu would not be able to kill him. However, there were no ifs in this world. Wei Jiuduan was dead, and Chu Xiu was still alive. This proved that his gamble this time was correct. Seeing that the Wei family patriarch was still shouting, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Stop shouting. No one here will believe your Wei family. So what if your Wei family has a long history? People have to look at the present and not live in history. If I say that you killed Wei Jiuduan, then you killed Wei Jiuduan." A hint of coldness and regret flashed in the Wei family patriarch's eyes. At this moment, he was really regretful. However, he did not regret making an enemy out of Chu Xiu. He regretted that he did not completely consign Chu Xiu to eternal damnation. In the Wei family patriarch's view, this Chu Xiu was simply a complete lunatic. The Wei family patriarch never would have thought that Chu Xiu actually dared to kill Wei Jiuduan in public. It was insubordination, and it was so ruthless. It was no longer important when Yang Ling was bribed by Chu Xiu. What was important was that Chu Xiu actually had the guts to kill Wei Jiuduan a long time ago. Could it be that he, Chu Xiu, was not afraid of the Guanzhong torture room's punishment? Dealing with an enemy like Chu Xiu, either he did not make a move, or he made a move to kill. Otherwise, there would be no end of trouble. The Wei family patriarch gnashed his teeth in hatred and said, "Chu Xiu, I underestimated you this time. You're simply a lunatic. I only miscalculated one thing, and that was that I did not expect my Wei family to be going against a lunatic. However, you won't be able to be arrogant for long. Killing a colleague is a serious crime, and insubordination is an even more serious crime. No matter how great your reputation in the Guanzhong torture room is, this reputation will not be able to protect you. I want to see if you, Chu Xiu, can survive this time." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Whether I can survive this time, I'm afraid you won't be able to see it." As his voice fell, Chu Xiu's hand formed a fist seal. When the seal fell, Gang Qi seemed to transform into a large net, covering all directions. Heaven and earth were useless. Under the wisdom fist seal, the Wei family patriarch's body was imprisoned. He wanted to break free, but he was shocked to find that the strength of Chu Xiu's vital qi was not inferior to his at all. The unity of heaven and man realm was a level stronger than the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Furthermore, he had been in this realm for so many years, while Chu Xiu had just stepped into the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm. Where did his vital qi cultivation come from? The demonic dance slashed down, and the power of the Avicii demonic blade was displayed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The surging demonic qi and vital qi merged, and the power that erupted made the Wei family patriarch fearful, and he could only bitterly resist. Right now, Chu Xiu had the intention to kill the Wei family patriarch. It should be said that from the moment he prepared to kill Wei Jiuduan, the Wei family had to be destroyed. If the Wei family was not destroyed, where could he find a scapegoat? Where could he find an excuse? In the past, when he faced Feng Wuling, Chu Xiu felt a great deal of pressure. He could only use the heaven's sun gazing at air as a gambling method to fight with his life on the line. In the end, he won the gamble, and Feng Wuling died. But now, when he faced the Wei family patriarch, Chu Xiu did not feel any pressure. There were 3 reasons. The first was that Chu Xiu had stepped into the 5 qis collecting in the origin realm, and his body was no longer the same as before. The second was his background. It was very difficult for a rogue cultivator to reach a high position. This difficulty was not only reflected in the lack of cultivation resources and the guidance of a famous teacher, but also in the cultivation technique. Those who could rely on an ordinary cultivation technique to achieve success were in the minority. Obviously, the Wei family patriarch was not one of them. Compared to Feng Wuling's maiden swordplay, his cultivation technique was on a different level. As for the third reason, it was because the Wei family patriarch's state of mind was different. He was a person who was afraid of death. Even if he was invincible in the world, he could not escape the pressure of time. Everyone in the pugilistic world would die one day, and the decline of one's qi and blood was inevitable. Those who could see through this naturally did not matter. In some large sects, those seemingly old people were actually the most terrifying. This was because they knew that they were not far from death, so they dared to use the last of their strength to fight for their sect. The power of extreme sublimation was very terrifying. However, those who could not see through this, were afraid of death, and always held back when they attacked. They did not dare to fight with their lives on the line, and such people were more likely to die. The Wei family patriarch was such a person. Back when he was at his peak, he only felt that his qi and blood were declining a little, so he began to cultivate in seclusion, hoping to slow down his aging. One could imagine how afraid he was of death. At this time, Chu Xiu had already made up his mind to kill, but the Wei family patriarch still did not fight with his life on the line. He only wanted to expose the fact that Chu Xiu had killed Wei Jiuduan, so that the Guanzhong torture room could punish Chu Xiu. With this kind of state of mind, the Wei family patriarch was forced to the extreme by Chu Xiu's Avici demon blade. As a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm, he was actually suppressed by Chu Xiu to the point where even counterattacking was a luxury. During the battle, the Avici demon blade in Chu Xiu's hand was evil and ruthless. At the same time, he would occasionally use the heaven's sun gazing at air to see if he could find any loopholes in the Wei family patriarch's defense. However, he had used up too much of his energy just now, so he could not use the heaven's sun gazing at air for a long time. However, it did not matter. Although the Wei family patriarch did not have any big loopholes when he attacked, it was impossible for him to make every move perfect. Once Chu Xiu found a small loophole, Chu Xiu would definitely attack wildly, almost injuring the Wei family patriarch. At this time, the other people of the Wei family were also very miserable. This time, the Wei family patriarch thought that the matter was in the bag, so he did not bring too many people. There were only a few disciples of the Wei family, most of whom were in the physical invulnerability or inner invulnerability realm. There were only 2 warriors at the 3-flower realm. However, on Chu Xiu's side, Tangya, Yan Bugue, and the others were all here. In addition, the warriors from the Guanxi branch under Wei Jiuduan were also here. Under the combined attack of these people, several people from the Wei family had already been killed. The people under Wei Jiuduan did not kill. The ones who killed were Chu Xiu's people. Seeing this scene, the Wei family patriarch began to panic. It seemed that Chu Xiu really did not intend to let him leave alive today. Chapter 331. Not shedding a tear until you see the coffin. This phrase perfectly described the mentality of some people, such as the Wei family's ancestor. Just now, if the Wei family's ancestor had intended to escape from the beginning, Chu Xiu would not have been able to catch up with a warrior of the unity of heaven and man realm. But now that both sides had fought for so long, the Wei family's people were almost all dead, and the Wei family's ancestor himself had consumed a lot of true qi. It was already too late for him to think of escaping now. The Wei family's ancestor swung the sword in his hand, and in an instant, a wave of icy blue gang qi rippled out, drawing the heaven and earth, causing an extremely cold force to seep into the gang qi ripple and rush towards Chu Xiu. The cold air lingered around his body, and the Wei family's ancestor also wanted to take this opportunity to escape. Other than Chu Xiu, no one dared to fight head-on against an expert of the unity of heaven and man realm, even Tang Ye and Yan Bugui. Facing the Wei family's ancestor, they had no choice but to make way. If they tried to forcefully resist, it would only be courting death. But at this moment, Chu Xiu formed a seal with both hands, and in an instant, a supreme light bloomed. The perfect Aquarius seal, fulfilling a lifetime's wish. There was a loud explosion, and the cold gang qi was extinguished. Chu Xiu's hand formed the inner binding seal, and his figure appeared in front of the Wei family's ancestor almost in an instant. A knife slashed down, and there was a trace of strange divinity in the Avicii demon blade, making it even more evil. In his shock, the Wei clan ancestor slashed out with his sword. The sword's edge drew in the heaven and earth, and stellar energy surged towards Chu Xiu's saber like an ice storm. However, it was directly shattered by the violent demonic saber. Even the Wei family's fifth revolution treasure weapon in the Wei family's ancestor's hand showed traces of cracks, and finally with a loud bang, it directly shattered. Chu Xiu's eyes were filled with murderous intent, forgetting the world of mortals, having no worries, and a state of selflessness. The Wei ancestor hadn't fought for more than a decade, and the sword in his hand hadn't been stained with blood for more than a decade. It didn't have the baleful aura of a weapon, and he himself didn't have any killing intent or battle intent. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, had slaughtered countless people along the way. He had experienced countless life and death battles. In that instant, his killing intent surged to the heavens, causing the Wei family ancestor's heart to tremble. This was the first time he had felt fear towards Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu were to use the heaven's sun gazing at air now, he would probably be able to see many flaws in the Wei family's patriarch. However, now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the selfless killing realm, his mind was filled with killing intent and battle intent. In his current state, he was unable to display a martial art like the heaven's sun gazing at air. However, it didn't matter now. Against the Wei family's ancestor, he could clearly kill him head-on. Why would he need to find a loophole to launch a sneak attack? As the fist fell, boundless killing intent surged. The powerful killing intent seemed to condense into a solid substance, dyeing everything around it crimson red as it charged towards the Wei family's patriarch. The annihilation fist of heaven and earth. In the great yin and yang sorrowful poem of Heaven and Earth, very few people in the Jianghu could recognize most of the martial arts. For example, Chu Xiu's great primordial chaos technique of Heaven and Earth. As long as Chu Xiu didn't say anything about it, no one would be able to recognize it. However, the annihilation fist of Heaven and Earth was very famous. There were many experts in the Eastern Qi military who knew this fist technique. It condensed killing intent to the limit, and even before the fist fell, the killing intent could already tear people apart. The Wei family's patriarch also recognized the annihilation fist of Heaven and Earth. At that critical moment, all the stellar energy in his body gathered in his right arm. He pointed out with his sword finger, and the surrounding stellar energy condensed into ice. However, he continued to point out with his second finger. The power of the ice stacked together, but it didn't explode. Instead, it was hidden within, and its power multiplied. In an instant, the Wei family's patriarch pointed out 9 sword fingers in a row. The power of the 9 sword fingers overlapped, like an iceberg. In that instant, the Wei family's patriarch's face was frighteningly pale. This was the Wei family's 9-layered cold mountain sword. It could be said to be the Wei family's trump card. In fact, when the Wei family's patriarch was young, he had used this sword technique to make a name for himself. When he was at his peak, he could indeed explode with the absolute power of the 9-layered cold mountain sword. However, after using this technique, the Wei family's patriarch felt that he had exhausted himself to the limit. The killing intent of the annihilation fist came crashing down. The powerful power could suppress everything. The 9 layers of power of the 9-layered cold mountain sword exploded with a loud bang. The powerful stellar energy rushed through Chu Xiu's internal organs and meridians, causing Chu Xiu's face to turn pale in an instant. However, it was soon followed by a hint of red. However, even so, Chu Xiu still didn't retreat. Under the state of the annihilation fist, even if Chu Xiu maintained his rationality, it was inevitable that he would be affected by this powerful killing intent. He swore not to rest until he killed his opponent. He didn't even use the internal lion seal to suppress himself. Chu Xiu directly used the power of the annihilation fist to meet the 9-layered cold mountain sword head-on. With a loud bang, the ice completely shattered. However, Chu Xiu's right arm had already been cut by the ice and was dripping with blood. However, these were only external injuries. Chu Xiu didn't even care. The fist landed, and the perfect Aquarius seal burst out. The blinding light shone down, and within the dazzling light, there was a ferocious killing intent. The Wei family patriarch did his best to resist, but he was still blasted by the seal until his blood boiled, and his figure fell back. Chu Xiu turned around and formed the great UnparalleledSwordWill seal. The powerful fist landed with a loud bang. They collided again, and there was a loud explosion. Right now, Chu Xiu's state could be said to be strange. He was like a robot, smashing down one after another with the great UnparalleledSwordWill seal. He was completely competing with the Wei family patriarch in stamina, primeval qi, and willpower. Although Chu Xiu was a realm lower than the Wei family patriarch, he had the glazed golden thread gu, and his cultivation methods that were not inferior to the top sections. His accumulation was not inferior to the Wei family patriarch. After more than 10 moves, the Wei family patriarch was already vomiting blood from the impact. He couldn't hold on any longer. In such an intense battle, no one could retreat. It was either kill the opponent or be killed themselves. Wei family patriarch felt fear in his heart. He wanted to retreat, but retreating meant death. Just as the Wei family patriarch's attacks were gradually slowing down and he had the intention to retreat, Chu Xiu formed seals with both hands. It was an incomparably complex seal. In an instant, the 5-colored light in Chu Xiu's hands shone brightly, and the power of the 5 elements burst out. They connected head to tail, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other, and smashed down like a great sun will seal. Sun will seal. Chu Xiu had used this seal technique before, but he had barely managed to do it. He hadn't unleashed its full might. The true power of the sun will seal should be at the 5 qi unification stage. The power of the 5 elements in the body had reached a balance, and the 5 elements had fused into one. Only then could the true power of the sun will seal be unleashed. The power of the 5 elements burst out, the 5 powers mutually reinforced and restrained each other, and the superimposed power was not as simple as adding them together. Under the sun will seal, the meridians in the Wei family patriarch's body shattered, and he vomited blood as he was sent flying. But immediately after, a black light appeared beside him. Heavenly demonic dance slashed across the Wei family patriarch's neck, causing blood to splatter. The Wei family patriarch's head was already in Chu Xiu's hands. The surrounding Guanxi branch martial artists were all stunned, including Chu Xiu's subordinates. Although they knew that Chu Xiu had killed a one with the world expert, that was only hearsay. Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, the shock they felt was incomparable to hearsay. Holding the Wei family patriarch's head, Chu Xiu popped a healing pill into his mouth, recovering his injuries and restoring his true qi. To be honest, Chu Xiu did not feel the slightest pressure in the battle with the Wei family patriarch. The feeling the opponent gave Chu Xiu was not even as strong as the leader of the River East's 5 heroes, Cheng Buji. The reason for this was very simple: the Wei family patriarch was afraid of death. Even though Chu Xiu had killed the Wei family patriarch in the end, until the last moment of his life, the Wei family patriarch did not choose to burn his blood essence to fight to the death. After all, for a martial artist of his age, his qi and blood had already faded. Burning his blood essence was equivalent to burning his lifespan. It was a pity that even if he did not fight to the death, Chu Xiu would fight to the death. The Wei family patriarch fantasized that he could escape unscathed and watch Chu Xiu suffer. In the end, the blood essence that he did not burn was scattered all over the ground. Looking at the people around him, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "The Wei family killed Lord Wei Jiuduan and looked down on the Guangzhong torture room's rules. They are traitors. Now that the Wei family patriarch has been executed, the rest of you, follow me to the Wei family and wipe them out completely." Yang Ling followed behind Chu Xiu and shouted, "Follow official Chu and kill the Wei family." In terms of strength and status, Yang Ling was naturally inferior to Chu Xiu. However, his identity as Wei Jiuduan's adopted son was very useful at this time. With Wei Jiuduan's death, he was naturally seen as Wei Jiuduan's successor by the other martial artists. At least in the eyes of these martial artists from the Guanxi branch, Yang Ling's words were more effective than Chu Xiu's. The crowd surged out of the courtyard. Chu Xiu called Du Guangzhong and the others over and transmitted his voice in a low voice, "You guys don't have to go to destroy the Wei family." Du Guangzhong immediately panicked. Destroying the Wei family was a great merit. What did official Chu mean by this? He did not want them to achieve any merit. Was he prepared to abandon them? Seeing Du Guangzhong's hesitant expression, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Don't think too much. I have other things for you to do. You have seen Wei Jiuduan's corpse. Bring Qin Fang, Lu Chengli, and the others to deal with it. You are all professionals. You should be able to deal with it to the extent that others can't see through it. If you really can't, then destroy the corpse. It doesn't matter." Chu Xiu had framed the Wei family for killing Wei Jiuduan. If this matter was spread to the outside world, no one would believe it. Chu Xiu did not expect them to believe it either. It would be fine as long as a small number of people chose to believe it. Now, Chu Xiu was dealing with Wei Jiuduan's corpse not to deceive others, but to have a reasonable explanation. At the very least, he could save face. Chapter 332. In the Nine Plains Wei family, the family head, Wei Mok, felt a little uneasy. However, he believed that there shouldn't be any changes to the situation. Wei Jiuduan definitely wanted to suppress Chu Xiu. With his status as the disciplinary officer, Wei Mok couldn't think of any way for Chu Xiu to break out of this predicament. Moreover, it would be useless even if they tried to use force. They were too experts at the oneness of heaven and man realm. Who in the Guanxi region could defeat them? However, at this moment, an intense battle cry came from outside the Wei family's manor. Wei Mok stood up abruptly, pushed the door open, and shouted, "What's going on? Who dares to behave atrociously in my Wei family?" At this time, a Wei family disciple ran over with a panicked expression and shouted, "Family head. Not good. Chu Xiu brought his men to attack our Wei clan and even said that the old ancestor killed Wei Jiuduan and has been executed. Our Wei clan despises the laws of the Guangzhong torture room and wants to destroy our Wei clan." Wei Mok's figure swayed as he shouted, "Impossible." He knew what the Wei clan's ancestor had gone to do. Why would the ancestor kill Wei Jiuduan for no reason? This was definitely a conspiracy. That Wei family disciple said miserably, "Family head, I know it's impossible, but Chu Xiu has already fought his way in. They didn't even give us a chance to explain ourselves." Wei Mok hurriedly ran to the front yard. The people of the Wei clan had already been forced to retreat step by step under the blades of the Guangzhong torture room martial artists. There was basically no room for them to retaliate. If all the Wulin forces in the entire Guanxi area united, they would indeed be more powerful than the Guanxi branch. However, if they were to face a force alone, the power of the Guangzhong torture room would be overwhelming. Wei Mok's eyes turned red when he saw this scene. The Wei family had never lost so many people in the Jianghu for so many years. These were the future hopes of the Wei family. Wei Mok shouted, "Stop! Chu Xiu, what do you mean by this? You said that my Wei family's ancestor killed Wei Jiuduan, but where is the evidence? No matter what, the Wei family is a big family in Guanxi, yet you want to destroy us just like that? Where are the laws and regulations of the Guangzhong torture room? What about the rules? Also, you're just an inspector of the Jian province. What right do you have to bring people to attack my Wei family?" What Chu Xiu was doing now was actually unreasonable according to the rules, but it didn't matter. Chu Xiu was here to kill people, so why would he care about whether it was reasonable or not? Therefore, in the face of Wei Mok's question, Chu Xiu only sneered coldly. Without saying a word, he charged forward with his saber. In the past, when Chu Xiu was at the Three-Flower Realm, he had fought with Wei Mok. Wei Mok's strength was considered mediocre even among the Five Qis Origin Realm martial artists. After all, the Wei family had been in a corner of Guanxi for a long time. Although Wei Mok was the family master, he basically didn't fight. Even if he did, it wasn't a battle of life and death. In addition, the Wei family's inherited martial arts were weak, which led to the opponent's combat strength being very low. At least, it was much lower than the 5 heroes of Jiangdong. Not to mention Chengbuji, Wei Mok couldn't even compare to LV Tong and Dong Xiangyi. After all, these people were often in the Jianghu and had almost never stopped fighting. At this moment, when Chu Xiu slashed with his saber, the Avicii demonic chi was fused with the blood-refined divine aura. In addition, Chu Xiu had directly stepped into the selfless killing realm. His killing intent was also condensed in this saber. This could be said to be extremely evil, and it directly caused Wei Mok's expression to change drastically. The ice sword on the long sword in his hand was condensed to the extreme. He even directly burned his chi and blood and spat out a mouthful of blood, causing the ice-blue sword to be mixed with a trace of blood red. Wei Mok's attack was much more decisive than the Wei family's old ancestor. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately burned his chi and blood. Unfortunately, he didn't have the Wei family's old ancestor's strength. In front of Chu Xiu, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. As the saber fell, Wei Mok's sword shattered, and the long sword in his hand also shattered. Wei Mok's entire body was slashed by this saber, and he vomited blood and was sent flying. Chu Xiu's hand formed the inner binding seal, and his figure was like a black light. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Wei Mok. The surging demonic chi that contained the evil divinity slashed down, and this time, Wei Mok's entire body was directly cut into two. With Wei Mok's current strength, he didn't even have the qualifications to withstand Chu Xiu's complete 3 blades of Avicii. Wei Mok's corpse fell, and the blood mist in the air didn't dissipate. This caused the Wei family members to be stunned for a moment, and then they immediately dispersed. Previously, the Wei family members didn't disperse, and they still had the courage to resist, because they had a patriarch like Wei Mok. But now, they saw their patriarch being killed by Chu Xiu in 2 slashes. This could be said to be extremely powerful, and they instantly collapsed, and started to flee. There was no need for Chu Xiu to go personally, the others could do it. Chu Xiu said to Ghost Hand Monarch, "Search the Wei family." These years, the Wei family has violated the rules of the Guangzhong torture room many times. These are all evidence. Gather the other financial and cultivation resources, and distribute them after the matter is over. Ghost Hand Monarch nodded with a smile. He was very good at this kind of thing. Right, Lord, what should we do with Wei Chongling? Ghost Hand Monarch suddenly remembered this person. Although he was a member of the Wei family, he was also the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu said indifferently, the Wei family is rebelling. As a member of the Wei family, how can Wei Chongling be anything good? He is a spy who infiltrated the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, he has to be killed. Ghost Hand Monarch nodded. At this time, Tangya heard this and suddenly said, Lord, you don't have to do anything about this. Leave it to me and Yen Bugui. Last time, we let this old man escape. This time, he won't be able to escape. Chu Xiu nodded, and suddenly asked, have you touched the threshold of the three-flower realm? Tangya nodded and said, last time when I fought with Wei Chongling, I sensed it. After all, I have been an assassin for so many years. Just relying on seclusion to gain enlightenment is not as fast as fighting to the death. These two people's performance in the Heavenly Sin Division had been outstanding. If there were no accidents, they could even rise to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters in the future. It was not strange that they had entered the three-flower realm now. After the Wei family was defeated, they were basically at the mercy of Chu Xiu and the others. However, the Wei family had so many martial artists, and Chu Xiu could not kill them all. Some martial artists who had escaped from the Wei family remembered that the Wei family still had Wei Chongling, so they went to the Spirit State Prefecture to inform Wei Chongling. At this time, Wei Chongling was still recovering in the hall. Last time, he had suffered greatly at the hands of Tangya and Yen Bugui, and his injuries had not yet healed. When he received the news of the Wei family's destruction, Wei Chongling's first reaction was disbelief, and his second reaction was terror. The Wei family was destroyed, and his greatest support was destroyed. Wei Jiuduan, who could suppress Chu Xiu in Guanxi, was also dead. Wouldn't Chu Xiu be able to crush him as easily as crushing an ant? As for whether Chu Xiu would be punished by the Guanzhong torture room in the future, Wei Chongling did not even dare to think about it. In his view, Chu Xiu had already gone crazy. He dared to kill anyone, and wanted to kill anyone. His forefather and Wei Jiuduan were both dead. Was he still missing? So when he received the news, Wei Chongling immediately prepared to flee. But when he stepped out of the hall, he was met by Tangya, Yen Bugui, and a group of martial artists under Chu Xiu's command. Before Wei Chongling could speak, Tangya said with a smile, Official Wei, we have come to send you on your way. As he finished, Tangya and Yen Bugui attacked together. As for the others, they were only responsible for watching Wei Chongling's subordinates. In reality, even if no one was watching, Wei Chongling's subordinates would not dare to attack. How many days had it been since Wei Chongling became the inspector? These people were the subordinates of the previous inspector, Kai Jingsheng. They had no loyalty to Wei Chongling. Also, as Chu Xiu attacked, all of Guanxi was in an uproar. Ordinary Jianghu constables like them did not dare to participate. Tangya and Yen Bugui did not take long to kill Wei Chongling. Last time, the two of them had worked together to seriously injure Wei Chongling. This time, Wei Chongling had not recovered from his injuries, and he was afraid. His combat power was not as good as last time. So in less than 15 minutes, Wei Chongling was killed in the fight between Tangya and Yen Bugui. As Wei Chongling died, the Nine Plains Wei family became a part of Guanxi's history. Even if some of the branch family members escaped in 2s and 3s, they probably did not dare to stay in Guanzhong. The events in Guanxi swept through all of Guanzhong like a storm. The news that Chu Xiu released to the outside world was that the Wei family had broken the law, doing all sorts of things that went against the laws of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Thus, he had been called over by Wei Jiuduan for questioning. In the end, the old ancestor of the Wei family had launched a sneak attack on Wei Jiuduan in anger, causing Wei Jiuduan's death. As for Chu Xiu, in order to avenge his superior, he had risked his life to kill the old ancestor of the Wei family, destroying the Wei family. Chu Xiu had released this news to the outside, and he had sent the same news to the headquarters. But anyone in their right mind would not believe Chu Xiu's words. The Wei family had done these things for a long time. Had Wei Jiuduan lost his mind? He was close to retirement before coming to investigate the Wei family. This clearly did not make sense. Also, the Wei family could not have killed Wei Jiuduan. Who was Wei Jiuduan? He was not a minor character, but the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room. While he was old and about to retire, he was still one of the upper echelons of the Guanzhong torture room. The Nine Plains Wei family was a large family in Guanzhong. They were famous in all of Guanzhong, much less in Guanzhong. But Guanzhong was the Guanzhong of the Guanzhong torture room. The Wei family dared to kill the Guanxi torture officer in a branch of the Guanzhong torture room? Even if the forefather of the Wei family drank a jar of fake wine, he would not do something like this. Chapter 333. The excuse that Chu Xiu had spread was very clumsy, so clumsy that people did not need to analyze it to guess that this was a fantasy story. People even suspected that it was Chu Xiu who had killed Wei Jiuduan. This time, people had spread rumors that Wei Jiuduan had allied with the Wei family to suppress Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had a reason to act. However, the only thing people were puzzled about was how Chu Xiu had managed to kill two Unity of Heaven experts. His strength should not be abnormal to such a degree, right? In any case, this matter had caused an uproar. Everyone in Guanzhong wanted to see how the main hall would handle the matter of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu appeared very calm at this time. He was still waiting in the provincial government as though he had not killed them. 3 days later, Yuqi rushed over from the main hall, traveling day and night. Seeing Chu Xiu's limited appearance, Yuqi couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Brother Chu, you've caused such a huge commotion, yet you can still sit still?" Chu Xiu had someone pour a cup of tea for Yuqi. He said coolly, "I have a clear conscience. Why can't I sit still?" Yuqi took a step closer and said gravely, "Brother Chu, you really did not kill Wei Jiuduan?" Chu Xiu said with a serious expression, "Brother Yuqi, you also suspect me? While I have conflicts with Wei Jiuduan, he is still my superior. How can I, Chu Xiu, do such a disgraceful thing?" Yuqi looked suspiciously at Chu Xiu. In any case, he did not believe Chu Xiu's words. However, he had not thought that Chu Xiu would tell him the truth. Yuqi said gravely, "Brother Chu, you know how much trouble you have caused this time. Right now, the hall master has sent me to inform you to go to the main hall for questioning. The main hall will send people to investigate Wei Jiuduan's death and the Wei family's matter. Come with me now. Of course, don't think about escaping." After Wei Jiuduan's death, the experts of the criminal division immediately sealed off the roads to Guanzhong. "You cannot escape." Chu Xiu smiled freely and said, "I, Chu Xiu, have a clear conscience. Why should I escape?" Yuqi looked deeply at Chu Xiu and said, "I hope so. Since Brother Chu has a clear conscience, then come with me to the Guanzhong disciplinary hall to be interrogated. We have to leave now. I hope Brother Chu will not make things difficult for me." Yuqi's attitude toward Chu Xiu did not change much because he was not sure if Chu Xiu could make it through this time. If it was someone else who had killed their superior, they would certainly be heavily punished. The lightest punishment would be having their martial arts crippled and being imprisoned in the Black Dungeon for the rest of their lives. But if this person was Chu Xiu, then things would be different. With Chu Xiu's strength and talent, he had already become the face of the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, the Guanzhong torture room wanted to punish him. One reason was that it was a pity, and the other was that it felt like slapping his own face. So until the end, no one knew what Chu Xiu's fate would be. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't worry. Since I have a clear conscience, I will not make things difficult for Brother Yuqi." Yuqi shrugged his shoulders. Whether Chu Xiu really had a clear conscience, only Chu Xiu himself knew. Anyway, his task was only to bring Chu Xiu to the main hall. He didn't care about anything else. However, according to Yuqi's understanding of Chu Xiu, although this person was a little crazy in some things, he was definitely not an idiot. Chu Xiu would not do something like putting himself in danger. Looking at Chu Xiu's calm appearance, could it be that he was already confident? The news that Chu Xiu followed Yuqi to the headquarters spread quickly. Of course, this was also the reason why Chu Xiu did not ask the Ghost Hand King and the others to cover up the news. As soon as this news came out, there was a sudden burst of discussion in the Guanxi area. Of course, there were also some people who secretly carried out all kinds of small tricks. Among the patrol envoys of the Guanxi region, Yang Ling was already Chu Xiu's man. Furthermore, he was a witness of this incident and was also Wei Jiuduan's adopted son. Yang Ling had long been summoned to the headquarters alone. Fang Hua and Sidu Xing did not think much of it after hearing the news. They were not young anymore, and their ambitions were not that big. Although they were also afraid of the fact that Wei Jiuduan had died in the hands of Chu Xiu, they did not dare to have any other thoughts. As for the remaining one, Jiang Taoran, he was secretly making some small moves. Jiang Taoran only had the strength of the Three-Flower Realm. Even if Wei Jiuduan died, Chu Xiu could not return to Guanxi, and he could not be the penal officer. However, Jiang Taoran really did not want Chu Xiu to return to Guanxi. The reason was very simple: he could not accept Chu Xiu's strength. Although Jiang Taoran was low-key and slippery, he was actually a scheming person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to snatch a prefecture from the hands of Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan during their fierce battle, and then reap the benefits. Previously, Chu Xiu's move to control the business lifeline of the entire Guanxi area had already made him very dissatisfied. Although Chu Xiu didn't let them suffer a loss and still gave them a large portion of the profits, Jiang Taoran was still dissatisfied. He was a patrol inspector, but in the end, he was like a puppet. He had no prestige at all. How could that be? He was not old guys like Sidu Xing and Fang Hua, who had no ambition. As long as there were benefits, everything was negotiable. Therefore, Jiang Taoran secretly spread the news that Chu Xiu had killed Wei Jiuduan and that this time, he would be severely punished by the Guanzhong torture room. He tried to stir up the momentum in Guanxi and add fuel to the fire, so that Chu Xiu would not be able to return. However, Jiang Taoran was cautious by nature, and he was very careful. He only added fuel to the fire in the dark, and he did not dare to show himself. Compared to Jiang Taoran, there were people who did things more directly, such as the Zhang family of Yuan continent. The Zhang family of Yuan continent was the only big family in Guanxi that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Wei family of Jiuyuan. The Zhang family's great ancestor, Zhang Wanshan, also had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm, but he was older than the Wei family's great ancestor. Zhang Wanshan was already more than 180 years old this year. Although warriors in the unity of heaven and man realm could theoretically live up to 200 years, this was only in theory. Warriors often had to face all kinds of killings in the pugilistic world. It was extremely cruel, and it was common for them to be seriously injured. When they fought with their lives on the line, they would even have to burn their blood essence. Although this kind of injury could be recovered in the later stages, it would still leave behind some hidden dangers. When a warrior's qi and blood declined, it would gradually erupt. Therefore, there were actually not many warriors who could live up to 200 years old at the unity of heaven and man realm. It was already not easy for the Zhang family's great ancestor to live to this age. At this time, the Zhang family's Zhang Kunz was reporting to Zhang Wanshan about Chu Xiu with a serious expression. Zhang Wanshan was wearing a golden brocade robe. His hair and beard were all white, but his face was still rosy. Although he was old, he was still a distance away from the end of his lifespan. After listening to Zhang Kunz's narration, after a while, Zhang Wanshan asked in a deep voice, "What do you think of this matter?" Zhang Kunz hesitated for a moment before saying, "It should be a good thing." The Wei family has been fighting with our Zhang family for so many years. Now that the Wei family has finally been destroyed, Chu Xiu was summoned to the headquarters this time. I reckon he's in trouble. Our Zhang family should be rising. Zhang Wanshan shook his head when he heard that. Without the lips, the teeth will feel the cold. You only saw the Wei family fighting with our Zhang family for so many years, but you didn't see the mutual support between our Zhang family and the Wei family all these years. Guanzhong torture room is Guanzhong torture room, and our pugilistic world forces are pugilistic world forces. No matter how we fight with the Wei family, we are on the same side. As long as Guanzhong torture room goes overboard, our two families can put down all the grudges and join hands at any time. Now that the Wei family has been destroyed, it's equivalent to losing half of the people to bear the pressure for our Zhang family. If anything happens in the future, our Zhang family will have to bear it alone. Zhang Kun's broke out in a cold sweat. After all, he was still young and could not see as far as Zhang Wanshan. Then, great ancestor, what should we do now? Zhang Wanshan said in a deep voice, we can't let Chu Xiu return to Guanxi. You know Chu Xiu's character. He's ambitious and domineering. This time, we don't know what methods he used, but Wei Jiuduan and Wei Hanshan actually died in his hands. Our Zhang family has had conflicts with Chu Xiu before. If we let him return to Guanxi, what will happen to our Zhang family? We will probably become the second Wei family. Zhang Kunz hesitated. But how can our Zhang family influence the headquarters? My Zhang family doesn't have anyone in the headquarters. Zhang Wanshan said in a deep voice, we don't have anyone there, and we don't need them to do anything. Go and gather all the forces that have a good relationship with our Zhang family. Let's write a joint petition and request Guanzhong torture room to punish Chu Xiu. What the Guanzhong disciplinary hall wants is stability. Right now, Chu Xiu's existence has already caused the Guanxi region to be unstable. As long as we create a large enough commotion, even the Guanzhong disciplinary hall will not be able to ignore it. Zhang Kunz nodded repeatedly after hearing this. The great ancestor was indeed the great ancestor. He was indeed far-sighted. In the martial world, there were some things that could be solved even if one didn't rely on fighting and killing. Just like now, the Zhang family only needed to move their lips, and they could increase the pressure on Chu Xiu in the main hall. At this time, Chu Xiu still did not know about the changes in Guanxi. After arriving at Guanzhong City, Chu Yuansheng personally came to pick up Chu Xiu. Seeing Chu Xiu, Chu Yuansheng sighed and said, Brother Chu, how did things become like this? Did you really kill Wei Jiuduan? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Big brother, don't you believe me? I, Chu Xiu, have always been a person who doesn't offend others if they don't offend me. I was forced to do this. Chu Xiu did not say that he killed Wei Jiuduan, but he also did not say that he did not kill Wei Jiuduan. However, psychologically, Chu Yuansheng was on Chu Xiu's side. His life was saved by Chu Xiu, and although Chu Xiu had always been extremely ruthless, it seemed that Chu Xiu had never taken the initiative to attack him. So subconsciously, Chu Yuansheng was still on Chu Xiu's side. Chapter 334. Chu Yuansheng rarely interfered with the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, but this time, Chu Yuansheng really didn't want anything to happen to Chu Xiu. Looking at Yuqi, Chu Yuansheng said in a low voice, Brother Chu has done so much for the Guanzhong torture room, and now you're going to punish him because of a groundless matter? Yuqi smiled bitterly and said, Hero Chu, you've misunderstood. The hallmaster and the other lords don't want Brother Chu to be wrongly accused, so they called him to the main hall for questioning. If Brother Chu is innocent, then they will naturally refute the rumors. Moreover, the hallmaster only invited Brother Chu here, not arrested him. Otherwise, the people going would not be me, but those guys from the criminal division. Don't worry, Hero Chu. Tomorrow, the hallmaster and the others will gather at the main hall to discuss this matter. Brother Chu is the face of the Guanzhong torture room, so the hallmaster and the others will definitely handle this matter carefully. Chu Yuansheng nodded and said, "That's good. Since it's like this, Brother Chu can stay at my place today. Is there any problem?" Yuchi nodded and said, "Of course, Brother Chu is not a prisoner. Naturally, you can stay wherever you want." Chu Xiu didn't escape halfway. Now that they were in Guanzhong City, Yuchi naturally didn't worry that Chu Xiu would escape. After Chu Yuansheng brought Chu Xiu to his house, he immediately said to him, "Brother Chu, don't worry. I'll go talk to Brother Guan and guarantee that you'll be fine this time." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Brother Chu, you don't have to do this. Your identity is special. If you talk to Hallmaster Guan about these things, I'm afraid it won't be good. It'll be easy for others to gossip." Chu Yuansheng snorted and said, "Let whoever wants to say it. Do you think I'm afraid of them?" As Chu Kuanga's only son, this legacy could last for a long time. As long as Guan Siyu was still alive, this legacy could also last for a day. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you very much, Brother Chu. However, there is one more thing I need to trouble Brother Chu with. I need to trouble Brother Chu to give something to someone." As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out a box and handed it to Chu Yuansheng. Chu Yuansheng asked in surprise, "To whom?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Give it to Mrs. Guan." Hearing that Chu Xiu wanted to give the item to Mei Qinglian, Chu Yuansheng couldn't help but frown. "Why are you giving it to her?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's just a small gift for Mrs. Guan. It's used to please a woman. You have to know that sometimes, a woman's pillow talk is more effective than any words." Chu Yuansheng curled his lips and said, "Brother Guan isn't the kind of person who is obsessed with women. I guess it's a waste of time for you to give it." Chu Xiu smiled and didn't speak. He didn't know whether Guan Siyu was obsessed with women or not, but Chu Xiu only knew that Mei Qinglian was not a simple woman. In fact, it was really meaningless for Chu Yuansheng to go this time. Whether it was Guan Siyu or the other people in the Guanzhong torture room, they could accommodate Chu Yuansheng on small matters, but they wouldn't let Chu Yuansheng mess around on such a big matter. However, Chu Yuansheng didn't notice this. Holding the thing that Chu Xiu gave him, Chu Yuansheng went straight to the headquarters. On the way, Chu Yuansheng didn't open the box that Chu Xiu gave him. Although he was also curious about what was inside, Chu Yuansheng's character was still trustworthy. If Chu Xiu didn't let him open it, he naturally couldn't open it. When he came to the study, Guan Siyu was still dealing with official business. Seeing that Chu Yuansheng had come, Guan Siyu directly asked before he could speak, "Are you here for Chu Xiu's matter?" Chu Yuansheng was stunned. He swallowed what he was about to say and just nodded. "It's because of Chu Xiu. Brother Guan, since Chu Xiu joined the Guanzhong torture room, he has made a lot of contributions to the Guanzhong torture room. If you punish him now, I'm afraid that the other disciples of the Guanzhong torture room will be bitterly disappointed." Guan Siyu shook her head and said, "If it was something else, I can promise you, but Chu Xiu's matter is a bit too big. It must be dealt with strictly. He has made a lot of contributions to the Guanzhong torture room, but if he really offended his superiors and killed his colleagues, I will definitely not forgive him." Seeing that Chu Yuansheng still wanted to say something, Guan Siyu shook her head and said, "All right, Yuansheng, go out. From now on, don't get involved in this matter." Chu Yuansheng had known Guan Siyu since he was a child, so he naturally knew what kind of character Guan Siyu had. Hearing that Guan Siyu said it resolutely, Chu Yuansheng knew that he wouldn't relent, so he could only leave resentfully. After walking a distance away from the study, Chu Yuansheng remembered that he still had something to give to Mei Qinglian. However, as a man, wasn't it a little too reckless to break into Guan Siyu's house? Just as Chu Yuansheng was in a dilemma, he happened to see Mei Qinglian walk in from outside. He quickly handed the box to Mei Qinglian and said softly, "Sister-in-law, this is what Chu Xiu wants to give you." I hope you can put in a good word for my brother in front of the hall master." When he said this, Chu Yuanqing lowered his head. He didn't even dare to look at Mei Qinglian's eyes. For some reason, he didn't fear Guan Siyu at all, but he was a little afraid of Mei Qinglian. After taking the box, a strange look appeared in Mei Qinglian's eyes. She slowly said, "As a woman, I shouldn't meddle in master's affairs. However, no matter what, Chu Xiu is an outstanding talent of the Guanzhong torture room's younger generation. It's better to handle this matter carefully. Don't worry, I'll talk to master." Hearing Mei Qinglian say this, Chu Yuanqing also breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. After nightfall, Chu Xiu was sitting in Chu Yuanqing's guest room with a cup of tea in his hand, as if he was waiting for someone. After a while, a black demonic aura rose in the room out of nowhere. As the demonic aura lingered, Mei Qinglian, who was wearing a red dress, walked out. Her red lips were like fire, and coupled with her cold face, it added to her charm. However, Mei Qinglian didn't look like an ordinary weak woman. Her aura was extremely powerful, and even Chu Xiu could feel the immense pressure. Mei Qinglian said calmly, "Chu Xiu, do you know that you're playing with fire now? You discovered my secret and even lured me here. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Chu Xiu poured a cup of tea for Mei Qinglian and said slowly, "If a martial Dao master wants to kill me, he doesn't even need to say a word. He can crush me with a finger. Since I'm fine now, it proves that Madam doesn't want to kill me yet, right?" Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in her eyes. Actually, she had always been interested in Chu Xiu. She had seen many young talents in the pugilistic world. She had even seen the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen before. However, it was the first time that someone from a humble background could reach the heights that Chu Xiu had. Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes twitched, and she said calmly, "I won't kill you now, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you in the next moment. Women are fickle, don't you know? Tell me, how did you know that I'm from the devil cult? Also, who are you? Why do you know the totem of the Devil Heart Hall?" Mei Qinglian took out a piece of silk cloth. There was a complicated and strange pattern drawn on it. This was the totem of the Kunlun Devil Cult's Devil Heart Hall. Other than the orthodox inheritors of the Kunlun Devil Cult, no one else knew about this thing. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "There are many people who practice devil arts in this world. However, to have such pure devil qi and hide it secretly, other than the Kunlun Devil Cult, I can't think of anyone else. If Madam is from the Kunlun Devil Cult, you'll naturally be able to recognize this thing. If you can't, I have other excuses to deal with it. As for why I know about this thing, it's very simple. It's because I'm also a disciple of the Kunlun Devil Cult. The devil is formless, and the great Tao is boundless. The holy fire refines the heart, and the devil flame devours the sky. I inherited the technique of the Devil Heart Hall's Hall Master, 9 Transformation Devil Heart, Nangong Wuming. Of course, it's not surprising that I know about this." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mei Qinglian was not as shocked as Mr. Lu in the past. This was because she had already guessed in this aspect. She had even tried to test Chu Xiu before. After all, Chu Xiu had too many devil arts. If he had obtained them all by chance, it would be too much of a coincidence. If not for the fact that Chu Xiu also knew the techniques of Buddhism and Taoism, Mei Qinglian could even confirm that Chu Xiu was from the devil cult. Later, after Chu Xiu obtained the heavenly demon dance, Mei Qinglian had also tried to test Chu Xiu's attitude towards the Kunlun devil cult. After all, whether it was the righteous Dao or the rogue cultivators in Jianghu, most people did not have a good impression of the devil cult. However, Chu Xiu was different. He did not seem to have a bad impression of the Kunlun devil cult. Mei Qinglian suddenly thought of what Chu Xiu had done in Eastern Qi. She asked, "Have you been in contact with the people of the Phaseless Devil sect?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Yes, Mr. Lu from the Phaseless Devil sect helped me a lot. Mei Qinglian sneered and said, Mr. Lu? Are you talking about that kid Lu Jin? Their phaseless demon sect was extremely loyal to the Kunlun demon sect. Even now, they were still shouting, Saint sect, as though they had gone mad. You can't be thinking that I'm the same as those fellows from the phaseless demon sect, selflessly helping you after hearing that you're a disciple of the Kunlun demon sect, right? I forgot to tell you that although I have a relationship with the Kunlun devil cult, I am not a direct descendant of the Kunlun devil cult. I am a member of the Maiden Demon sect. How can you expect a sect that has been destroyed to be loyal to the Kunlun devil cult? Not to mention that you are just a lucky person who accidentally obtained the inheritance of the Kunlun devil cult. Even if you are the successor of the patriarch Dugu, why should I help you selflessly? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He did not expect that Mei Qinglian's real identity was the same as Mr. Lu and the others. She was not a direct descendant of the Kunlun devil cult. The Maiden Demon sect was one of the vassal sects of the Kunlun devil cult in the past. Just like the Yunu Palace, there were only female disciples in the entire sect. However, the Maiden Demon sect was more unlucky. The phaseless devil sect was only hidden in the dark. Their own strength was still very strong, and they were still one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. However, the Maiden Demon sect had disappeared without a trace 100 years ago. Even the pugilistic world thought that the Maiden Demon sect had completely lost its inheritance. They did not expect that there was still a Mei Qinglian. Chapter 335. Chu Xiu didn't find Mei Qinglian's attitude strange at all. No matter how loyal the people of the devil cult were, they couldn't all be like the phaseless demon sect. After such a long time since the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed, they were still so loyal and wanted to restore the devil cult. The darkness demon sect hadn't appeared in the pugilistic world for 100 years. Now that Mei Qinglian was hiding by Guan Xiyu's side, it was easy to imagine what she had experienced. So this time, when Chu Xiu pretended to be the successor of the devil cult, he didn't plan to use his identity to get Mei Qinglian to help him like he did with Mr. Lu. Chu Xiu looked at Mei Qinglian and smiled. Madam, you must be joking. The successor of the patriarch Dugu doesn't need other people's help. I told you my identity because I wanted to tell you one thing. You and I are not enemies. We have a chance to work together. Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with interest. You can't even protect yourself now, and you're still talking about working together with me? You killed Wei Jiuduan and destroyed the Wei clan. Do you know that because of you, the entire Guangzhong area almost fell into chaos? What do you have to work together with me? Chu Xiu said in a low voice, since Hallmaster Guan didn't send people to attack me immediately, it means that I still have a chance. Moreover, I can guarantee that when it comes to the torture hall, the people on my side will definitely be the majority. However, Hallmaster Guan's side will need you, madam. Madam, you've been by his side for so many years. I believe that you'll have a great influence on him. In the Guangzhong torture room, with Hallmaster Guan's prestige, as long as he speaks, he'll have at least half the weight. As long as I can get through this, the position of Guanxi torture officer will definitely be mine. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, You're quite confident. However, I want to ask, what will I get from this? Don't tell me you really think that I should help you for free just because you are a direct descendant of the devil cult? Chu Xiu smiled and said, Madam can get a lot of things, and that is my support. I believe that Madam should be able to tell that although Hallmaster Guan dotes on Madam, the other disciplinary officers are somewhat dissatisfied with Madam. They don't want a woman to meddle in the affairs of Guanxi. Once Madam shows any signs of doing so, they will resist and oppose you. With my identity and the fact that Madam has helped me this time, I will definitely stand behind you in the future. Helping me now is equivalent to helping yourself, Madam. Chu Xiu didn't ask what Mei Qinglian was plotting by Guan Xiyu's side or what plans she had. Sometimes, it was hard to be muddle-headed. Knowing too much was actually not good for oneself. However, Chu Xiu knew that Mei Qinglian definitely needed to obtain a large portion of power in the Guanzhong torture room. However, she clearly didn't have this opportunity now. Mei Qinglian was also present when the Guanzhong torture room was selecting people to participate in the God Weapon Conference. At that time, Mei Qinglian was only a spectator and didn't even say a word. Even so, it still caused the other disciplinary officers and the head of the disciplinary officers to be somewhat dissatisfied. One could imagine how much resistance Mei Qinglian would face if she really began to meddle in the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. It had to be said that the martial world was actually somewhat unfair to women. Just like most aristocratic families and sects, although there were female disciples, other than sects like the Yu Palace that were all made up of women, it was extremely difficult for the female disciples of other sects to meddle in the affairs of the sections. It was basically impossible for them to reach a high position. After muttering to herself for a long time, Mei Qinglian suddenly smiled. Most of the time, her expression was cold. Now that she smiled like this, there was a kind of coquettish charm. I finally know how you were able to reach your current position. It's not only because of your strength, but also because of your mouth. Your ability to bewitch people's hearts is really good. No wonder you're the successor of my holy church. Chu Xiu said calmly, I'm not bewitching people's hearts. I'm just speaking the truth. Since we're all from the same holy church, there's a basis for cooperation. However, I only believe in benefits. Without benefits, it's useless no matter what I say. Madam can bring benefits to me now, and I can bring benefits to you in the future. That's enough. Back in Eastern Qi, Mr. Liu from the Phaseless Demon sect helped me greatly. I didn't mistreat him either. Most of the treasures that Prince and Li's residence has accumulated over the years have been taken away by the Phaseless Demon sect. A layer of black fog bloomed around Mei Qinglian. She took a deep look at Chu Xiu and said, I hope you can bring me benefits when the time comes. As soon as she finished speaking, Mei Qinglian's figure disappeared into the black fog, completely disappearing. Chu Xiu picked up the cup and drank the tea in it. He let out a long breath. It was very tiring to deal with people at the martial Dao Grandmaster level, especially when this person was a woman. Even Chu Xiu, who thought he had a good understanding of people's minds, couldn't figure out what a woman was thinking. However, the identity of the Kunlun devil cult was relatively useful. Without this identity, Mei Qinglian probably wouldn't even have the mood to talk nonsense with Chu Xiu. She would just slap him to death. However, at this time, Chu Xiu had a very strange thought. He had pretended to be a disciple of the Kunlun devil cult twice. If he continued to pretend like this, would he really become a member of the Kunlun devil cult one day? At this time, in the punishment hall's headquarters, Mei Qinglian changed into a light blue dress. Compared to the red dress just now, she was more elegant and less aggressive. She walked into Guan Siyu's study with a bowl of chicken soup. Seeing that Guan Siyu was still deep in thought, she put the chicken soup on Guan Siyu's table and walked behind him. She gently squeezed his shoulder and said, Master, are you worried about Chu Xiu? Guan Siyu frowned and nodded. I didn't expect Chu Xiu to be so bold. He actually dared to kill his superior. His reasons and excuses are also very ridiculous. Anyone can see that the Wei family absolutely has no reason to kill Wei Jiuduan. They also don't dare to kill Wei Jiuduan. At this time, Guan Siyu was really at a loss. Although Chu Xiu had a clumsy excuse and sent people to dispose of the corpse to make it unrecognizable, saying that the corpse was damaged by the stellar energy during the fight, after careful consideration, Chu Xiu was still the most suspicious person. Severely punishing Chu Xiu would definitely not wrong him. However, if he was severely punished, it would not be good for the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu's talent and strength were clear for all to see. He was in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard and had the strength to kill someone at the unity of heaven and man realm. In any sect, he was a person who could hold up the facade. In the past, the Guanzhong torture room did not have such a person. Now, they did. However, according to the laws of the Guanzhong torture room, they had to be crippled or even killed. That would be a great loss for the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, outsiders would mock the Guanzhong torture room for being blind and so on. It was not easy to be an iron-faced judge. In the past, when Guan Siyu had just taken over as hall master, he could cripple his own personal disciple without hesitation for the sake of the Guanzhong torture room's laws. But now, for the benefit of the Guanzhong torture room, he was not sure if he should kill Chu Xiu. At this time, Mei Qinglian's hand, which was pressed on Guan Siyu's back, suddenly moved. A strange rhythm floated through the entire study. It was formless and silent. Guan Siyu did not sense it at all. Mei Qinglian softly said, "Actually, it would be better if Master thought about this from a different angle. Don't you know what kind of person Wei Jiuduan is? That old thing is greedy beyond measure. Although we have to rely on him to guard the Guanxi area all these years, he has tarnished the reputation of the Guanzhong torture room. Wei Jiuduan's death does not affect the Guanzhong torture room at all. But what about Chu Xiu? He is a talent of the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. Regardless of whether he is killed or crippled, the loss is the strength of the Guanzhong torture room. On one side is a talent of the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room, and on the other side is an old man who deserves to die. The choice is already very obvious. We can even give Chu Xiu the position of the Guanxi torture officer and let him replace Wei Jiuduan to guard the Guanxi area. Chu Xiu has the strength and reputation. I believe he will do better than Wei Jiuduan. Guan Siyu closed his eyes slightly. He had always been full of energy, but now he suddenly felt a little tired and even wanted to sleep. Narrowing his eyes, Guan Siyu said in a low voice, "But if we just let Chu Xiu be like this and even give him the position of the Guanxi torture officer, isn't it equivalent to destroying the laws of the Guanzhong torture room? And if we help Chu Xiu do something like this, I'm afraid he will go even more overboard in the future." Mei Qinglian smiled and said, "The laws of the Guanzhong torture room are to make the Guanzhong torture room stronger. But right now, not punishing Chu Xiu can already make the Guanzhong torture room stronger. Since this is the case, why do we have to rigidly follow the laws of the Guanzhong torture room? Moreover, there is no direct evidence of Chu Xiu's death, right? As for Chu Xiu, Master doesn't need to worry at all. Wei Jiuduan is just a mediocre good-for-nothing, and he is greedy for power. That's why he died in the hands of Chu Xiu. With Master's strength and status, are you afraid that you can't suppress Chu Xiu?" Guan Siyu patted Mei Qinglian's hand and sighed. "Madam, you are still thinking of everything. I am old, and there are some things that I can't think of thoroughly." Mei Qinglian gently squeezed Guan Siyu's shoulder and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Master, you are in the prime of your life. How can you be old? It's just that there are too many things to do in the Guanzhong torture room, and it has distracted you. It's a pity that I'm just a woman. I can only give you ideas in the dark, but I can't help you with your worries directly." Guan Siyu smiled and said, "I am already so old. How can I not be considered old? In the past, when I first took over the Guanzhong torture room, I didn't feel tired as easily as I do now. Forget it, go and rest first. We will see what others say tomorrow." Chapter 336. Early in the morning, in the Guanzhong torture room's main hall, 3 torturers from all over Guanzhong had come. Of course, one of them would never be able to come. Only Si Ming, the 3rd leader of the Criminal Investigation Division, had come. The other 2 leaders hadn't arrived. The Criminal Investigation Division represented the Guanzhong torture room's most elite fighting force. Typically, they wouldn't get involved in such matters. Si Ming was only here to listen on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Division. He wouldn't express any opinions. Wei Jiuduan's death had caused a huge commotion. It wasn't as if no one in charge of the Guanzhong torture room had died accidentally. However, Wei Jiuduan could be said to be the first to die at the hands of his own subordinates. As for how to deal with Chu Xiu, this was definitely a major matter that concerned the future of the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, the other people in charge of the Guanzhong torture room had to express their opinions. In the torture hall's headquarters, Guan Siyu looked at the people below and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, how should we deal with Chu Xiu's matter?" Yin Baotong was the first to speak. "Hall Master, is there a need to ask such questions? Does Chu Xiu think we're all idiots? He actually used such a clumsy excuse to deceive us." Wei Jiuduan was clearly killed by him. Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew that Wei Jiuduan and Yin Baotong weren't on good terms. There was quite a bit of enmity between them. Now that Wei Jiuduan was dead, Yin Baotong should be clapping his hands in celebration. In reality, Yin Baotong was really clapping his hands in celebration. However, Wei Jiuduan had a grudge against him, and so did Chu Xiu. Of his two disciples, one had been crippled by Chu Xiu, and the other was suspected to have been killed by Chu Xiu. He had to settle this score with Chu Xiu no matter what. It was good that Wei Jiuduan was dead. It was even better that Chu Xiu was dead. Hearing Yin Baotong say this, Chu Simo said calmly, "Everything in the Guanzhong torture room requires evidence. Do you have evidence to prove that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jiuduan?" Last time, when Yin Baotong had caused trouble for Chu Xiu, Chu Simo had jumped out to stop him. This had already displeased Yin Baotong. He didn't know when Chu Simo had started colluding with Chu Xiu. Yin Baotong snorted. "Evidence? Is there any need for evidence when even an idiot can see through it?" Chu Simo retorted, "You don't have proof, but I do." At the time of the incident, other than Chu Xiu's subordinates, there were also the Wei family members who were all killed. However, Wei Jiuduan's adopted son, Yang Ling, was there. Right now, Yang Ling has been summoned to the main hall. You might not believe the words of others, but do you still not believe the words of Wei Jiuduan's adopted son? Chu Simo said to Guan Siyu, "Hall Master, we'll know once we ask him." "We don't have physical evidence, but we have witnesses." Guan Siyu nodded. "Go and bring Yang Ling over." Moments later, Yang Ling walked into the hall with some apprehension. To be honest, although Yang Ling was Wei Jiuduan's adopted son, he hadn't been to the hall many times. He hadn't seen so many important figures in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he was Wei Jiuduan's adopted son in name, he was actually just an errand boy. Wei Jiuduan didn't really want to groom him as his successor. Of course, he wouldn't bring him to the hall to help him build up his connections. Yang Ling nervously cupped his hands at Guan Siyu and the others. "Greetings, Hall Master and Sirs." Yin Baotong said coldly, "You should know why we called you over. Previously in Guanxi, you said that it was the Wei family who killed your adoptive father. I know you have your concerns and don't dare to speak the truth. Now, in front of us, you can speak freely. Who killed Wei Jiuduan?" Yang Ling said with a puzzled look, "Lord Yin, what do you mean? I have no concerns. My adoptive father was killed by the Wei family." Yin Baotong frowned when he heard that. Previously, he had also investigated Yang Ling's matter. He discovered that Yang Ling and Chu Xiu should not have any relationship, and the two of them even had conflicts. Wei Jiuduan wanted to take care of his adopted son and was afraid of Chu Xiu, so he gave the state capital that should have been given to Chu Xiu to Yang Ling and made him the patrol envoy. Therefore, the relationship between the two of them should not be good. Previously, when Yang Ling said that the Wei family killed Wei Jiuduan, Yin Baotong thought that Chu Xiu was pressuring Yang Ling so that he didn't dare to speak the truth. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. Yin Baotong couldn't help but emphasize his tone and snorted coldly. "Yang Ling, think carefully before you speak. This is the headquarters. The Hall Master is watching. I'll give you another chance. Who killed Wei Jiuduan?" Facing the aura of an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm, Yang Ling couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. However, he still gritted his teeth and said, "I'm telling the truth. Even if you ask me 100 times, it was the Wei family patriarch who killed my adoptive father." Just as Yin Batong was about to say something, Chu Simo suddenly said, "Enough. This is the headquarters. Do you still want to confess under torture?" At that moment, Guan Siyu also glared at Yin Batong and said to Yang Ling, "You may leave." Yang Ling nodded as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden and quickly retreated. Seeing Yang Ling's behavior, everyone present was a little puzzled. Yang Ling was Wei Jiuduan's adoptive son. Even if Chu Xiu threatened him, he still didn't dare to speak the truth in the headquarters, right? Everyone also couldn't understand what method Chu Xiu used to actually make Yang Ling speak up for him so obediently. Guan Siyu looked at Si Ming and Xiao Yi and said in a deep voice, "The two of you, tell me. What do you think about this matter?" Yin Batong stared at Xiao Yi and Si Ming. Right now, he and Chu Simo each had their own opinions. If these two also agreed to punish Chu Xiu, even Guan Siyu would have to consider the opinions of the majority. Si Ming said, "The Criminal Investigations Division has never cared about these matters. We will do whatever the Hall Master says." Si Ming chose to abstain. This was very normal. After all, he had no relationship with Chu Xiu, but he didn't have any ill feelings towards Chu Xiu. The existence of the Criminal Investigations Division was the elite force of the Guanzhong torture room to kill people. The Criminal Investigations Division didn't want to care about these messy matters, and there was no need for them to care. Xiao Yi pondered by the side. After a while, he knocked on the table and said, "I feel that this matter should be investigated carefully. I'm afraid you don't know Chu Xiu's status in the underworld. Even among the top 10 warriors on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu's reputation is considered to be in the front. My Guanzhong torture room has been silent for so long. Do you know what the image of the Guanzhong torture room in the underworld was in the past? It was just a constable who specialized in solving cases. It was lukewarm and would forever be a subordinate in the underworld. Now, Chu Xiu is famous in the underworld. He came from the Guanzhong torture room. When the people of the underworld mention Chu Xiu, they can't forget the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu's existence can also tell the entire underworld that the Guanzhong torture room also has the ability to nurture such an outstanding person. Through Chu Xiu, the people of the underworld can also know how powerful the Guanzhong torture room is. To put it simply, the current Chu Xiu is the face of the Guanzhong torture room. We can investigate and deal with this matter, but we must be careful. Otherwise, if we destroy our own face, it will be a joke." Xiao Yi said so much, but he didn't make it clear whether he supported punishing Chu Xiu or letting Chu Xiu go. However, the people present weren't stupid. They could clearly hear the meaning in his words. He was actually on the side of Chu Xiu. Although there was no direct evidence that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jiuduan, he did it too blatantly and couldn't stand scrutiny. Xiao Yi said that this matter needed to be investigated carefully. He had laid out so much for Chu Xiu's role in the Guanzhong torture room. Didn't he mean to let Chu Xiu go? As soon as Xiao Yi said this, Yin Batong's expression darkened. To be honest, Yin Batong never expected Xiao Yi to stand on Chu Xiu's side. Among the 4 torture masters of Guanzhong, Xiao Yi was the youngest and the strongest. Although he usually seemed frivolous, he carried a lot of weight. Once he made a decision, it was more effective than Yin Batong and Chu Simo combined. At this time, Yin Batong could only look at Guan Siyu. If Guan Siyu insisted on punishing Chu Xiu, then it would be useless even if everyone stood on Chu Xiu's side. In the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu's prestige was enough to take up more than half of the weight. Among the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room, the ones with the most weight were the previous hall master, Chu Kuanga, and the current hall master, Guan Siyu. Chu Kuanga completely relied on his own strength and personal charisma, while Guan Siyu led the Guanzhong torture room to prosperity and confirmed the status and strength of the Guanzhong torture room. Only the two of them had the right to have the final say in the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, Guan Siyu was also frowning in thought. To be honest, he never expected Chu Xiu's prestige in the Guanzhong torture room to be so high. It was one thing for Chu Simo to speak up for him, but now even Xiao Yi was speaking up for Chu Xiu. This was enough to prove Chu Xiu's value. Xiao Yi didn't form cliques in the Guanzhong torture room. Although he usually appeared to be a little lazy, he was the person with the least petty thoughts in the Guanzhong torture room. He was also a person who truly thought for the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. Even he had stated Chu Xiu's value, which proved that severely punishing Chu Xiu now was indeed not beneficial to the Guanzhong torture room. However, Guan Siyu vaguely felt that it seemed a little inappropriate to let Chu Xiu off just like that. But just as this thought rose in his mind, he couldn't help but think of what Mei Qinglian had said to him yesterday. Guan Siyu subconsciously said, "In that case, we really have to be more cautious in this matter. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room will be the one to suffer. Let's put Wei Jiuduan's death aside for now. Just send a few people to keep an eye on it. Chu Xiu has nothing to do with this case for the time being." Hearing Guan Siyu say this, Yin Batong suddenly looked unlucky. Although Guan Siyu didn't say that he would completely clear Chu Xiu of suspicion, he had already said that this case would be put aside for now, so it was no different from ending it. Chapter 337. Chu Xiu had said that Mei Qinglian had a great influence on Guan Siyu, and that was indeed the case. Regardless of whether it was to find an ally for himself or for Chu Xiaoda to find a backer in the future, he definitely wouldn't suffer a loss by helping Chu Xiu. On the contrary, the higher Chu Xiu climbed, the more advantageous it would be for him. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Guan Siyu and said, "Don't worry, Hall Master. If I become the disciplinary officer, I can suppress all of this within a month. I'll make the Guanxi land quiet down, and there won't be any unnecessary sounds." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "The Zhang family's actions are simply a joke." Following Yuqi into the hall, Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Guan Siyu and said, "Greetings, Hall Master." If Guan Siyu had convicted Chu Xiu just now, Yuqi was prepared to tell Guan Siyu all of this information. But now that Chu Xiu had survived this calamity, he naturally wouldn't say anything to offend Chu Xiu. Yin Batong snorted coldly and turned to Guan Siyu. He cupped his hands and said, "Hall Master, the penal officer is different from other positions. One must be cautious." In the past, when Wei Jiuduan was still around, he relied on his prestige to suppress the Guanxi region. But now, Chu Xiu hasn't even come to power, but he has already caused the Guanxi region to be filled with resentment. If Chu Xiu becomes the penal officer, the Guanxi region will definitely be in chaos. Guan Siyu nodded and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, let's put aside the matter regarding Wei Jiuduan for now. Now that Chu Simo has suggested that you take over as Guanxi's penal officer, what do you have to say?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's very simple. If Hall Master is determined to punish me, then it won't be you, Brother Yuqi. I probably won't have a chance to defend myself. And since Brother Yuqi is here, I reckon I've almost survived this calamity. Guanzhong is the Guanzhong torture room's Guanzhong. When did the Zhang family have the right to tell us what to do? Wei would find out about this sooner or later." However, Guan Siyu had gathered everyone to discuss matters early in the morning, and he hadn't had time to inform Guan Siyu. Before Yin Batong could continue speaking, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Also, does Lord Yin mean that you look down on my 5G's origin realm? It's not wrong that the disciplinary master wants to look at ability and strength. Although I, Chu Xiu, am only at the 5G's collecting mind, it's not like I haven't killed someone at the oneness of heaven and man realm before. Since Lord Yin has doubts about my strength, then fine, why don't we go out and have a spar? Let's see if I'm qualified to take over this position. Yin Batong choked on Chu Xiu's words. Everyone in Guanzhong knew that before Wei Jiuduan died, Chu Xiu's power in Guanxi was second only to Wei Jiuduan. This was the source of the conflict between the two. If it was so easy to choose the disciplinary master, Guan Xiyu would not have let Wei Jiuduan sit in this position for so long. However, Chu Xiu couldn't even fight for this position, so was there a need to be humble? There were many people who didn't want him to sit in this position. No one in the main hall dared to inform Chu Xiu, so how did he know the outcome? As expected, just as Chu Xiu finished speaking, Yin Batong sneered and said, "Shameless boasting. You, Chu Xiu, are just a junior martial artist who just joined the Guanzhong torture room. You're also at the Five Qis collecting mind realm. What right do you have to take over as the disciplinary master?" This time, Chu Simo stood up to help Chu Xiu, but it had nothing to do with Chu Xiaoda. This was because he also saw the potential in Chu Xiu. Guan Xiyu looked at Chu Xiu with rapt attention and said in a low voice, "Is this a military order?" Everyone present heard it. "If you can do it, your position as the disciplinary master will be secured. If you can't, you won't even be able to keep your position as patrol inspector." Chu Xiu had been summoned to Guanzhong this time, and his future was unknown. It would be surprising if those people who wished for nothing more than for him to die did not stir up some trouble. Guan Xiyu coughed and said, "All right, we're all members of the Guanzhong torture room. It's not the critical moment. What's the point of fighting and killing among our own people?" If it were anyone else who encountered Guan Xiyu's question, they might be a little humble. Chu Simo didn't have much of a relationship with Chu Xiu, but ever since Eastern Qi had returned, his foster son, Chu Xiaoda, had strongly recommended Chu Xiu to Chu Simo. He had told Chu Simo that as long as he stood on Chu Xiu's side, there would definitely be benefits in the future. Yuqi laughed bitterly and said, "You're really open-minded. However, your guess is correct. Wei Jiuduan's matter has been temporarily put aside by the hall master, so there's basically nothing for you to do. However, Lord Chu Simo's sudden nomination of you as the Guanxi disciplinary master has caused quite a stir. Currently, the hall master is calling for you." Chu Xiu's future was limitless. This was publicly acknowledged. Even if Yuqi was Guan Xiyu's personal disciple, there was no harm in forming a good relationship with Chu Xiu. However, Yin Batong had brought up the matter again, so he could only tell the truth. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Of course it's a military order. If I can't even handle such a small matter, I won't even be able to be the disciplinary master, let alone take my position." Chu Simo spread his hands and said, "If you don't want Chu Xiu to be the Guanxi disciplinary master, why don't you recommend someone more reliable? Tell me, other than Chu Xiu, who else is qualified to be the disciplinary master?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "It's my responsibility." Before anyone else could say anything, Yin Batong immediately stood up and objected, "What kind of joke is this? The matter of Chu Xiu killing Wei Jiuduan hasn't been concluded yet, and you actually want him to be the Guanxi disciplinary master? Does that mean that Chu Xiu hasn't committed a crime and has instead performed meritorious deeds?" With that, Guan Xiyu turned his gaze to Yuqi. Most of the information that was handed to Guan Xiyu would have to go through Yuqi. When Guan Xiyu had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room, he had also ruthlessly killed many martial arts factions that dared to despise and challenge the dignity of the Guanzhong torture room. As an iron-faced judge, he was not only merciless towards his own people, but he was also merciless towards outsiders. This time, although no one had seen Chu Xiu kill Wei Jiuduan, he had directly blown up the Wei family's patriarch in front of everyone. This was a truly powerful battle record that no one could ignore. If they had to promote a disciplinary master from the Guanxi area, there was really no one else but Chu Xiu. For example, now, Guan Xiyu, who had originally been prepared to treat this matter seriously, had directly spoken up and set this matter in stone. Chu Xiu had been able to kill the state of unity of heaven and man at the 5 Qis toward the origin realm. As long as he could survive this tribulation, he would definitely become a big shot in the Guanzhong torture room in the future. Chu Xiu was not surprised by these matters. He had a great reputation in the Guanxi area, but no matter how great his reputation was, there were more people who hated him. When he saw Yuqi coming, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry. He smiled and said, "It seems that I have survived this tribulation." Previously, when Chu Xiu had killed Feng Wuling, the people who had seen that battle were only some unaffiliated cultivators from the pugilistic world. There were no experts, so their descriptions were somewhat unclear. This also led to most people not believing that Chu Xiu had the combat power to kill the state of unity of heaven and man. This included Yin Batong. Guan Siyu frowned and asked, "Chu Xiu, what do you have to say about these two matters?" The Guanzhong torture room needs dignity. In recent years, the Guanzhong torture room has been peaceful. Everyone has been recuperating, but some people have forgotten what it means to be in awe. Yuqi asked curiously, "How do you know? Why are you so confident?" Guan Siyu frowned and asked, "What's going on?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and cupped his hands. "Thank you for the reminder, Brother Yuqi." At that moment, Chu Simo suddenly said, "Hall Master, the position of Guanxi's torturer is still vacant. I suggest that Chu Xiu be the torturer." After the Guanzhong torture room had been peaceful all these years, some people had indeed forgotten the dignity of the Guanzhong torture room in the past. He was one with heaven and man, and he was also the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room. He was a warrior of the older generation, so it was normal for him to defeat Chu Xiu. However, if he were to lose, even if it was a draw, he would be the one to be embarrassed. Therefore, he didn't wish to fight Chu Xiu because he would be at a disadvantage no matter what. Yin Batong opened his mouth, but he couldn't name anyone. There were many experts at the one with heaven and man realm in the Guanzhong torture room, but they all had their own positions. Chu Xiu's domineering attitude might make others uncomfortable, but it suited Guan Siyu's taste. Since Chu Xiu was fine, there was no need for Yuqi to deliberately keep a distance from Chu Xiu. Instead, he revealed some information to Chu Xiu without any harm. At that moment, Guan Siyu said in a deep voice, "Go and ask Chu Xiu to come in." Not everyone can be the torturer. Whether Chu Xiu is qualified to be the torturer depends on himself. Yuqi said in a low voice, "There was news that came in the middle of the night yesterday. The martial arts factions in Guanzhong were secretly discussing that Chu Xiu killed Wei Jiuduan. They also described some of the dirty dealings between Chu Xiu and Wei Jiuduan very clearly. It seems that it was done by people from within the Guanzhong torture room. As for the Guanxi Yuanzhou Zhang family, they joined forces with more than 10 factions to submit a petition, requesting the Guanzhong torture room to severely punish a lunatic like Chu Xiu who violated the rules and killed the innocent." Yin Butong's face turned red from Chu Xiu's domineering attitude. But to be honest, he really didn't want to fight Chu Xiu. It wasn't that he didn't dare, but he didn't want to. As soon as he finished speaking, Yuqi immediately went to ask Chu Xiu to come in. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Yin Batong and sneered, "Lord Yin, do you think I'm not qualified? But the Guanzhong torture room's promotion has always been based on merit and strength, not seniority. What are the requirements of the torturer? To be able to keep the Guanzhong and the 4 regions under control. At present, in Guanxi, other than me, Chu Xiu, who else can keep others under control? Situ Xing or Fang Hua? Call them in and see if they dare to say that they are stronger than me, Chu Xiu." Yin Batong thought that he was much stronger than the Wei family's old ancestor, that coward who was afraid of death. But he still didn't have the confidence to face Chu Xiu. In fact, Chu Xiu had arrived at the main hall a long time ago, but he had been drinking tea in a study room. Chapter 338. Although Chu Xiu had issued a military order on the spot, the the position of torture officer had successfully fallen into his hands. Although it was only temporary, Chu Xiu was confident that he could make it permanent. Yin Butong's face darkened, and he didn't say anything else. Guan Xiyu's words carried enormous weight. No one could refute his decisions. However, Yin Butong had always felt that something was strange. He had been with Guan Xiyu for a long time. When Chu Kuanga was the hall master, he was the Jianghu constable of the Guanzhong torture room. He had been Guan Xiyu's colleague in the early years, so he understood Guan Xiyu's personality. The Iron Judge's words were not just for show. In the early years, Guan Xiyu had indeed been extremely ruthless and wouldn't favor anyone. However, in recent years, Guan Xiyu had always made some unexpected decisions. Although it didn't damage the interests of the Guanzhong torture room, it didn't match Guan Xiyu's personality. Just like today, although Guan Xiyu didn't show it clearly, he was definitely biased toward Chu Xiu. Otherwise, Chu Xiu wouldn't have been able to get through the crisis so easily and even get promoted. However, Yin Butong didn't dare to say anything else. He could only leave with a darkened face. After Chu Xiu left the door, Yuqi followed him out. He cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Congratulations, Brother Chu. Not only are you fine this time, but you've also been promoted to torture officer. In the history of the Guanzhong torture room, Brother Chu, you are the youngest torture officer." Chu Xiu asked with a smile, "Brother Yuqi, are you envious?" Yuqi shook his head and said, "Others can't be envious of your position. I don't dare to be envious either." Yuqi was a sensible person. Others could only see that Chu Xiu had become the torture officer at such a young age, but no one saw what Chu Xiu had sacrificed for this position. He had really fought with his life on the line. Moreover, Chu Xiu had yet to stabilize his position. The news that came from the Guanxi region just now was enough to explain everything. There were people who were dissatisfied with Chu Xiu internally, and there were also the big clans in the Guanxi region stirring up trouble externally. If Chu Xiu couldn't solve all these problems within a month, he wouldn't even be a patrol inspector, let alone the position of penal officer. At most, he would be thrown into the criminal division to be an ordinary secret agent. Yuqi was cautious by nature. He didn't quite approve of Chu Xiu's extremely dangerous method. One careless move would mean losing the whole game. He was Guan Xiyu's personal disciple. As long as he steadily cultivated and accumulated experience, when he reached the unity of heaven and man realm, he could basically choose to be the head of the criminal division or a torture officer. He didn't have to risk his life like Chu Xiu. After exchanging a few words with Yuqi, Chu Xiu walked out the door. Mei Qinglian walked over leisurely from afar. Chu Xiu only cupped his hands at Mei Qinglian and didn't say much. There were many people in the main hall, so it was better to keep a low profile. When he stepped out of the main hall, Chu Yuansheng was waiting outside. When he saw Chu Xiu, Chu Yuansheng immediately went over and laughed. "I knew that Brother Chu would be fine this time. In front of Big Brother Guan, my words still count." Chu Yuansheng didn't think that Guan Xiyu was standing on Chu Xiu's side because of Mei Qinglian. He thought that it was because he had gone to find Guan Xiyu yesterday. Although Guan Xiyu hadn't given him a chance to speak, she had secretly stood on Chu Xiu's side. Chu Xiu didn't expose him. Instead, he cupped his hands and said, "Thanks to Big Brother Chu's help, I was able to successfully survive this calamity." Chu Yuansheng waved his hand and said, "Is there a need to be so polite between us? It just so happens that you are in Guanzhong. Stay a few more days before you leave." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm afraid I really won't have time to stay in Guanzhong this time. I just took over as the disciplinary officer, but there is some unrest in Guanxi. If I can't completely quell these matters in a month, I'm afraid not only will I lose my position as disciplinary officer, but I will also lose my position as patrol inspector." Chu Yuansheng hurriedly said, "In that case, I won't keep Brother Chu any longer." However, I believe that with Brother Chu's ability, it won't be a problem for you to resolve these matters. After bidding farewell to Chu Yuansheng, Chu Xiu directly returned to Guanxi. While Chu Xiu was still on the road, the news that Chu Xiu had taken over as the disciplinary officer came from Guanxi. Chu Xiu's subordinates were naturally celebrating. Although they had confidence in Chu Xiu, the matter of Wei Jiuduan's murder had blown up so much that they were still a little uncertain. But now, not only was Chu Xiu fine, but he had even taken the position of disciplinary officer. What did this mean? It meant that in the future, the entire Guanxi would belong to them. Meanwhile, Jiang Taoran's expression turned extremely ugly when he received the news. He simply couldn't understand what the headquarters and the hall chief were thinking. Chu Xiu had committed such a huge crime, and the Guanxi region was in a mess. In the end, this Chu Xiu was still able to become the disciplinary officer. Was there still any respect for the rules? Although Jiang Taoran was not convinced, he had no choice but to put away his dirty tricks in the dark. He began to keep a low profile and erase all traces. On the Zhang family's side in the Yuan continent, the Zhang family's elder ancestor, Zhang Wanshan, sighed and called Zhang Kun's over. He said, "Go tell all the Zhang family members and the forces that are connected to our family to stop making a fuss. The outcome has been determined. Chu Xiu has become the disciplinary officer. No matter how much we make a fuss, the Guanzhong torture room will not replace Chu Xiu as the disciplinary officer. Otherwise, the appointment of the Guanzhong torture room will really become a joke." Zhang Kun's was still a little unconvinced. He said, "Elder ancestor, are we just going to let it go this time? Once we choose to keep a low profile, our Zhang family will be completely disgraced this time." Previously, the Zhang family had aggressively joined forces with so many martial arts forces to jointly write a letter to the headquarters to find trouble with Chu Xiu. It looked like they were determined to pull Chu Xiu down. In the end, not only did they not pull Chu Xiu down, but they also allowed Chu Xiu to be promoted. If they kept a low profile at this time, wouldn't it be equivalent to admitting defeat to Chu Xiu? Anyway, in the eyes of the other martial arts forces, the Zhang family had lost a lot of face this time. Zhang Wanshan sighed and said, "Before Chu Xiu became the disciplinary officer, we could still compete with him. But now that he has really become the disciplinary officer, we will be the ones who suffer no matter how we compete. Remember, never challenge the Guanzhong torture room in the Guanzhong region. Otherwise, we will always be the ones to suffer." Since Zhang Wanshan was so insistent, even if Zhang Kun's was a little unconvinced, he could only nod and do as Zhang Wanshan said. When Chu Xiu returned to Jianghu Prefecture, the Ghost Hand King, Du Guangzhong, and the others were already waiting at the city gate to welcome Chu Xiu. When they saw Chu Xiu coming, everyone bowed and said, "Congratulations on being promoted to the disciplinary officer, sir." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I haven't stabilized my position yet. I heard that the Guanxi region was a little chaotic while I was away. The hall master only gave me a month's time. I have to settle all the mess in a month's time. Only then can I be considered to have completely stabilized my position. Time waits for no man. Go take over the Guanxi branch first." Wei Jiuduan was dead, and now that Chu Xiu was the disciplinary officer, the Guanxi branch would naturally be taken over by him. Whether or not the people under Wei Jiuduan were Wei Jiuduan's confidants, Chu Xiu did not plan to use them anymore. The Guanxi branch could only be his people. After everyone packed up, they immediately went to the Guanxi branch and officially began to take over the entire Guanxi region. Although the warriors under Wei Jiuduan had some complaints about the warriors who were directly under the Guanxi branch being scattered to other prefectures, they still understood the principle of a new ruler having new ministers. In addition, Chu Xiu's fierce reputation was still there, so they did not dare to say much. After taking a few days to deal with these things, Chu Xiu asked the Ghost Hand King and Du Guangzhong, "Tell me in detail what happened in the Guanxi region during this period of time. Who is behind this? The Ghost Hand King said first. The Jianghu is led by the Yuan continent's Zhang family. Other than the Yuan continent's Zhang family, the other martial arts forces do not have the strength nor the guts to challenge you at this time. However, after you became the disciplinary officer, the Yuan continent's Zhang family quietened down. It seems that they are ready to admit defeat and do not want to be your enemy. Upon hearing this, Chu Xiu sneered and said, "People have to be responsible for their words and actions. Do they really think that they can pretend that nothing has happened by keeping a low profile now? How naive and ridiculous." Chu Xiu had never been a magnanimous person. After plotting against him once and failing to succeed, they kept a low profile and admitted defeat. Did they think that they could get away with this? How could it be so simple? For people in the Jianghu, it is always more effective to talk about swords and fists with them than to reason with them. If someone offends you, stabbing them with a knife is always more effective than compromising with them. Du Guangzhong said at the side, "There are also some people who spread the news that you killed Wei Jiuduan in the Jianghu. They also said some dirty things between you and Wei Jiuduan clearly and logically. This was definitely done by the people in the Guanxi torture hall. I sent people to investigate. The person who did it was very careful and did not leave any traces. However, even the stupidest method of elimination could be used to deduce who was the one who secretly did it. Situ Xing and Fang Hua did not have the guts nor the reason to do it. I sent people to investigate. They were definitely not the ones who did it. Since this is the case, there is only Jiang Taoran left." There was a trace of coldness in Chu Xiu's eyes. To be honest, he did not expect that the person who did it would be Jiang Taoran. Because even if Chu Xiu could not become the disciplinary officer, it would not be his turn. What he did was purely harming others without benefiting himself. However, Chu Xiu did not want to know why Jiang Taoran did this. In any case, for him, these were the people he was going to clean up this time. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Go and inform Situ Xing, Fang Hua, Jiang Taoran, and Yang Ling to come to the torture hall branch. A new officer makes 3 changes. It is also time to clean up a group of people. To resist foreign aggression, we must first settle the internal affairs. First sort out the internal affairs in Guanxi, and then go and deal with the Zhang family." Chapter 339. In the hall of the Guanxi branch, Situ Xing, Fang Hua, Yang Ling, and Jiang Taoran were all there. However, the 4 of them were in 3 different states at this time. Yang Ling was very proud because in the end, he still made the right bet. Standing on Chu Xiu's side was always the right thing to do. Now that Chu Xiu has become the penal officer, he, who has always stood on Chu Xiu's side, will certainly get a lot of rewards. Situ Xing and Fang Hua, on the other hand, have an indifferent attitude. They are all veteran inspectors. Even if Chu Xiu plays the game of changing the emperor and changing the ministers, he still won't be able to change them. Moreover, although their relationship with Chu Xiu was not very good, it was not too bad. They did not become enemies, so they are not worried that Chu Xiu will settle accounts with them. As for the last one, Jiang Taoran, he is very nervous. Although most of the traces of what he did in the dark have been cleaned up by him, Jiang Taoran is still somewhat worried that someone will find some clues. In the hall, the 4 people each have their own thoughts. They did not even say a word. After a long time, Chu Xiu pushed open the door of the hall and walked in. The black robe that represents the penal officer looks very oppressive. His imposing manner is even stronger than Wei Jiuduan's in the past. This made Fang Hua and Situ Xing subconsciously sit up straight, not daring to be presumptuous. He went straight to the main seat and sat down. Situ Xing and the others subconsciously stood up and respectfully cupped their hands and said, "Greetings, Darren." Previously, Situ Xing and Fang Hua were still thinking that the 2 of them are veteran inspectors, but in the end, Chu Xiu, a junior, climbed over their heads. Will it be a bit awkward for them to salute Chu Xiu? But when they see Chu Xiu now, they know that their worries are unnecessary. Just by relying on Chu Xiu's imposing manner and the strength that he has always shown, it is enough to crush them. Of course, the two of them still had complicated thoughts. When Chu Xiu first came to Guanxi, they didn't even look at Chu Xiu and didn't even bother to greet him. In the end, only a few years later, they had to greet Chu Xiu. This made them feel a little upset. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said indifferently, "Have a seat. We're all old acquaintances, so I won't say anything more." When Wei Jiuduan was around, the Guanxi region was turned into a mess by him. Now that he's changed, the rules will naturally have to change as well. Both Situ Xing and Fang Hua nodded their head. A new official will make a clean sweep. With Chu Xiu's character, if he is still amiable, it would be strange if the Guanxi area remains the same as before. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Actually, I only have one request, and that is to be tough against outsiders. Don't forget who is the master of the Guanzhong region. In the future, no matter who it is, if I find that he or she gives in to other martial arts forces, then don't blame me for being rude. If you don't have the ability, then find someone who has the ability to be the inspector." Situ Xing frowned and said, "But what if those martial arts forces are forced into a corner? We're not afraid of a single force in the martial arts world, but if they join forces, the power of the Guanxi region may not be able to suppress them. If this matter is brought to the hall master, we'll all be punished." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't be afraid of making a big deal out of this. If it gets big, I'll take responsibility. All you have to do is to execute it." However, just as Situ Xing was about to say something, he quickly held back. Now that Chu Xiu was in the limelight, it was not a good thing to contradict Chu Xiu. At worst, he would just pretend to obey but secretly oppose. Anyway, he didn't want to have a conflict with the local martial arts forces. These martial arts forces would give him a lot of money and cultivation resources every month, which Situ Xing didn't lack. Why would he want to offend those people? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "I've said what I need to say. It's time to settle old scores." Everyone present was stunned. They didn't understand what Chu Xiu meant. However, then Chu Xiu smiled coldly at Jiang Taoran and said, "Sir Jiang, what do you think?" Jiang Taoran, who had been distracted, was shocked. He quickly stood up and forced a smile. He said, "Official Chu, what do you mean?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "I should be the one asking you what I mean. Jiang Taoran, you and I used to be colleagues. I don't think the grudge between us is that big, right? You actually secretly spread rumors, trying to make me your mortal enemy. What do you think I mean?" Jiang Taoran's complexion suddenly changed. He quickly said, "Official Chu, I'm wrongly accused. You said it yourself. We don't have any enmity between us. How could I do this kind of thing that harms others without benefiting myself?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "You have to ask yourself. To be honest, I'm also very curious." Jiang Taoran's complexion became solemn. He said, "Official Chu, if you can produce evidence to prove that I did this, I won't say anything. But now, Official Chu, you are fabricating this kind of thing out of thin air. I'm not convinced." At this time, Jiang Taoran's forehead was full of cold sweat. He felt that he had been careful enough. It was absolutely impossible to leave any evidence behind. He was also betting that Chu Xiu was only guessing and didn't have any direct evidence. Situ Xing and Fang Hua were silent. In fact, they knew that this matter was most likely done by Jiang Taoran. From the moment the news came out, they had already guessed it. Except for Jiang Taoran, no one else had any reason to do this. However, they didn't intend to get involved in this matter. They wanted to see how Chu Xiu would deal with this matter. Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Taoran with rapt attention. There wasn't the slightest killing intent in his eyes. However, the invisible pressure made Jiang Taoran's forehead full of cold sweat. "You're not convinced? I don't need you to be convinced. I don't have any evidence. I, Chu Xiu, don't have the habit of relying on evidence when doing things. Too many people have died in the Guanxi branch during this period of time. I don't want to kill anymore. Now, I'll give you two choices. One is to cripple your own martial arts and get out of the Guanzhong torture room. The other is, if you can't do it, I'll cripple your martial arts for you." As soon as Chu Xiu's words came out, except for Yang Ling, the three people present were stunned. They didn't expect that Chu Xiu would be so ruthless. No matter what, Jiang Taoran was the inspector in charge of 2 prefectures. Not only did he want to give up this power, Chu Xiu even wanted to cripple Jiang Taoran's martial arts. This was no different from killing him. Jiang Taoran shouted angrily, "Chu Xiu! No matter what, I'm still the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. You want to cripple my martial arts without any evidence and kick me out of the Guanzhong torture room. What right do you have? I want to go to the hall master and ask for an explanation. I don't believe that in this Guanzhong torture room, you, Chu Xiu, can still cover the sky with one hand." At the side, Sita Xing and Fang Hua couldn't sit still at this time. The two of them quickly tried to persuade him, "Your Excellency, isn't this punishment a bit too heavy? Please reconsider." The two of them didn't have the slightest relationship with Jiang Taoran. Right now, they were trying to persuade Chu Xiu purely because they felt some sympathy for the death of the rabbit. Chu Xiu treated Jiang Taoran like this today. Would he do the same to them in the future? Sita Xing and Fang Hua didn't know, so they tried to persuade him. However, at this time, Chu Xiu seemed to not hear their words. He just looked at Jiang Taoran and said with an expressionless face, "It seems that you chose the second one. Well, I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu's figure moved. In a flash, he had already arrived in front of Jiang Taoran. A golden light bloomed. The great King Kong will seal suddenly fell. The bright golden light suddenly shone in the entire meeting hall. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he could easily kill some of the weaker unity of the Heaven Realm martial artists. For example, the Wei family's ancestor. With Jiang Taoran's current strength, he didn't have the slightest strength to fight back in front of Chu Xiu. Under the great King Kong will seal, Jiang Taoran couldn't dodge. But under Chu Xiu's great King Kong will seal, his pitiful aura didn't even last for a breath's time. His whole body was directly blown away. However, not waiting for him to fly far away, Chu Xiu directly followed up. A palm print was printed on Jiang Taoran's dantian. The powerful palm force directly smashed Jiang Taoran's dantian and tore the meridians in his body. Jiang Taoran suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes revealed unwillingness and regret. But soon after, because he couldn't bear this kind of injury, he directly fainted. Chu Xiu lightly said, "Drag Lord Jiang out." Lord Jiang is worried about official affairs, which caused his old injury to relapse. He needs to recuperate for a while. I'm afraid he can no longer continue to be a patrol. As soon as his voice fell, several Jianghu constables immediately came in. As if dragging a dead dog, they immediately dragged Jiang Taoran out. Seeing this scene, Sita Xing and Fang Hua suddenly shivered. They had a new understanding of Chu Xiu's strength and overbearingness. But on second thought, Chu Xiu even dared to kill Wei Jiuduan. What else does he not dare to do? That Jiang Taoran was also courting death. If his little tricks were used on a reasonable person, it wouldn't be a big deal. But right now, Chu Xiu didn't want to be reasonable with him. No matter what evidence you have, if I want to kill you, then you must die. If I want to cripple you, you won't be able to leave Guanxi branch standing. Turning around, Chu Xiu showed a bright smile to Sita Xing and Fang Hua and said, you too don't need to take it to heart. In fact, I am a very reasonable person. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. You are different from Jiang Taoran, so naturally, I won't treat you like this. Situ Xing and Fang Hua showed an ugly smile. At this time, even if they don't believe it, they have to force themselves to believe it. Otherwise, they will die very miserably. Chu Xiu waved his hand and called Du Guangzhong, Ghost Hand King, and the others in, and said in a deep voice, "At present, there are some accidents in my Guanxi branch, so there is a serious shortage of manpower. Therefore, I decided to promote some patrol to a higher position and reorganize the order of the whole Guanxi branch." Hearing this, Yang Ling, who was on the side, became spirited. Those who should be killed were killed, those who should be crippled were crippled. It's time to harvest. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.